Chapter 152. The evacuation of the citizens of Jiang City and Xiao Zhu's takeover of Jiang City's army were carried out almost at the same time. The citizens would not disobey the orders given by the princess herself. No matter how puzzled and confused they would leave temporarily to protect their families' lives when they heard that the city was in turmoil. The only ones who did not leave were the old, weak, sick, and disabled who could not travel long distances. They were unable to move for various reasons and did not want to wander around on the road. They would rather die in their hometown. The most difficult ones were probably some of the aristocratic families in Jiang City. They were displeased with Mu Hongjin over the years and secretly had disloyal thoughts. However, Mu Hongjin had always been swift and decisive. Although she was a woman, she had always forcefully suppressed all voices of opposition. However, this time, the crisis in Jiang City was menacing. Mu Hongjin was unable to do many things at once. These aristocratic families were eager to take advantage of this opportunity to make some moves. Mu Hongjin could not leave Jiang City. Once she left, not only would she give a chance to those who secretly opposed her, but it would also mean that she had given up on the city and the citizens of the city. As the princess of Jiang City, she enjoyed the love and respect of the citizens. At this time, she should take responsibility. A disguised inconspicuous carriage secretly left the gate of the prince's residence. Mu Hongjin, who was dressed as a maid, stood at the gate of the prince's residence. Half of her body was hidden behind a pillar as she looked in the direction Mu Xiaolu left. Mu Xiaolu did not know about the crisis in Jiang City. She naively thought that she was leaving to attend the king's birthday celebration in her grandmother's place. When she left, she was very happy and said that she wanted to bring a gift for Mu Hongjin. When she came back, it would be summer. She even wanted Mu Hongjin to accompany her to make sweet ice cream. Mu Hongjin only withdrew her gaze when she could no longer see the back of the carriage. Just as she was about to turn around and enter the residence, she glanced and seemed to see a man in white standing opposite her. She could not help but stop and look over. It was a man dressed in white. His face could not be seen clearly. He was hiding in the courtyard across the street. Sunlight shone down from the roof, casting a large shadow. He stood in the shadow, and his face could not be seen clearly. Only a long sword hung at his waist and a zither on his back could be seen clearly. On the wide street, the flow of people was turbulent. Among the people coming and going, he raised his head slightly. He seemed to be looking at her through the crowd, but also seemed like he was not looking at her. A horse-drawn carriage carrying goods slowly passed by. When Mu Hongjin looked up again, there was only the dazzling sun. There was no one on the other side of the street, as if it was just her imagination. She stood there quietly for a moment, then walked away. At night, the oil lamp in the Chui residence's study room was still lit. Large lanterns were placed in the four corners of the room, illuminating the room. Chui Yuezhi's study room was more like an armory than a study room. The room was cold and cheerless and square. Apart from a few scrolls that were randomly piled on the table and a black wooden shelf with books on it, there was nothing elegant about the room at all. However, he was not a person who liked to read. There was a map hanging on the wall. The map was huge and took up half of the wall. A river was drawn in the middle, and the whirlpools and reefs near the river were clearly drawn. There were more than 10 people sitting in the room. They were all martial artists like Chui Yu. They were all Chui Yuezhi's colleagues and subordinates. If Yuto entered the city this time, these people would be the deputy leaders of Jiang City's army and cooperate with Xiao Zhu. He Yan and Xiao Zhu sat on one side, while Fei Nu and Qi Wu stood behind them with their arms crossed. Chui Yuezhi held a charcoal pencil and drew a circle on a conspicuous place on the map. This is the most suitable place to go ashore in the canal. Chui Yuezhi pointed at the place he drew. If we go ashore from here, the two armies will fight here. This place is flat and suitable for Jiang City's army. However, he glanced at Xiao Zhu and felt a little guilty. We don't have enough men and horses. Jiang City did not have many soldiers and horses. Emperor Wenxian would not allow such a thing to happen. In the past, many vassal kings and generals disbanded in order to protect themselves. Mu Hongjin was the same. Emperor Wen Xian was especially merciful to leave behind less than 20,000 soldiers of Jiang City. With 20,000 soldiers and horses, it was not enough to rebel and set off a big wave. Similarly, it was not enough for the Yuto to resist tens of thousands of murderous soldiers. Cui Yuezhi also understood this point. Even the cleverest housewife could not cook without rice. Even if they had General Fengyun, who was a brave soldier, they did not even have soldiers. How could he fight with others? With his face? It's not that we don't have enough men and horses. Xiao Ju looked at the map and said calmly, it's that we don't have enough ships. Ships? One of Cui Yuezhi's subordinates looked at him in confusion. It was not their fault. Jiang City had been peaceful for so many years. Other than Cui Yuezhi and the others who were older, the younger ones had not even been to a real battlefield. Xiao Ju tapped the teacup in front of him with his finger and said, you tell me. He Yan, me. Cui Yuezhi and the rest of his subordinates looked at He Yan. He Yan had now changed back to his female disguise. Everyone present had heard about how he defeated Mu Yi in the martial arts arena today. However, the only thing a female subordinate with outstanding skills could do was to protect her master's safety. More importantly, she could kill a few people on the battlefield. Arranging troops and formations and analyzing battle reports were not things that ordinary people could do. Moreover, men were probably born with a sense of superiority over women in terms of military affairs. Thus, they were somewhat mischievous towards Xiao Ju's actions. They thought that the rumors were not completely true. Everyone said that General Fengyun was cold and heartless and did not get close to women. It turned out that it was all fake. Now, he was blinded by lust and allowed this female subordinate who had a close relationship with him to fool around. For a moment, everyone looked at Xiao Ju as if they were looking at an incapable ruler who had been bewitched by a vixen's concubine. All these years, He Yan had long seen the gazes of men who looked down on women countless times. He wanted to teach these people a lesson. After thinking about it, he did not refuse. He stood up and walked to the map with a smile. Cui Yuezhi returned to his seat. The rest of the people looked at He Yan with an expression that said, let's see what nonsense she is going to spout. He Yan did not look at the map. He only looked at the crowd and said, these are not important. Everyone did not understand. There is no other way to fight on the water. Big boats beat small boats, big guns beat small guns, many boats beat few boats, many guns beat few guns. You are small boats and small guns, few boats and few guns. No matter how you look at it, where you go ashore and how you arrange your troops are not the most important. In the way, except for the imperial guards, firearms are prohibited. They only talk about boats. As long as the Yudo has enough boats, they can win. If you want to win a battle with fewer people, you can't do without boats. On the water, they have more boats. On the shore, they have more people. This map is not used in this way. Although the people present hadn't fought in the past few years, they weren't fools. Whether He Yan was spouting nonsense or not, they were well aware of it. She hit the nail on the head and pointed out the crux of the problem. For a moment, everyone's contempt disappeared. Miss He, Cui Yuezhi said, but you also know that in these years, His Majesty has prohibited the privately raising of troops, let alone soldiers and boats. The ships on the canal are originally used to transport goods or carry people on long journeys. Jiang City would never dare to build its own navy, much less use firearms. He Yan sighed in her heart. She naturally knew this. After all, the previous dynasty had a rebellion. After the previous emperor succeeded the throne, he paid special attention to reducing the power of the vassals. The current vassals were actually the same as the nobles with no real power in Shuo City. Dare I ask Military Governor Xiao? One of Cui Yuezhi's subordinates looked at Xiao Ju and carefully asked, how many soldiers does Yudo have? Xiao Ju, 100,000, more and not less. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. With such a difference in military strength, it was difficult for them to have any hope. The people in the city have already been evacuated by His Highness. They left through the city gates. One of the deputy soldiers said with a dry voice, "We will try our best to delay for more time." The meaning of his words was that everyone was prepared to sacrifice themselves. The people who evacuated from the city, as well as His Highness, were the seeds of hope. The only thing they could do was to buy more time for the people. It was only a matter of time before the city was captured. Xiao Ju's gaze lightly swept across everyone. She sat up slightly and was about to speak when suddenly, a woman's clear voice sounded. "It is not a good thing that the morale is so low. You must know that we have a famous general here." "Do you know what a famous general is?" Everyone was stunned. "You will not lose a battle that you should not lose, and you will have a chance to win a battle that you should not win. This is what a famous general is." He Yan raised his eyebrows. "It seems like we will lose without a doubt. Even a famous general can find a breakthrough and turn defeat into victory. There is a famous general here who can turn the situation around with his own strength. How do you expect him to face himself like this?" She thought that there was not only one famous general here, but a pair. 2 famous generals from Dawei were here. If they lost, they would not be able to face others. No one knew her background. They only looked at Xiao Ju and thought that Xiao Ju's subordinates really did not spare any effort to flatter him. They even believed that Xiao Ju could turn defeat into victory in such a terrible chess game. How much did they worship him? Cui Yuezhi was silent for a moment and asked Xiao Ju, "Then Military Governor Xiao, how should we turn defeat into victory?" The world did not know that Xiao Ju had won the Battle of Water with a small number of troops. After all, to outsiders, Xiao Ju had led 100,000 soldiers from the southern prefecture to victory in Guo City. However, at that time, they were pouring water into the city. They were attacking the city, not defending it. Moreover, the environment of Jiang and Guo City was different. Jiang was a water city. Although they were both attacked by water, the difference was like heaven and earth. Xiao Ju leaned back in his chair. The joints of his left hand were slightly protruding as he touched the tea lid. He looked at He Yan, his beautiful eyes filled with deep emotions, and said, "You tell me." He Yan frowned slightly. He said, "You have fought with the Yuto before. You know the Yuto's methods better than anyone else." The Yuto's methods were crude and direct. This was related to their style of doing things. They had been hiding in the dark for so many years, probing and harassing from time to time. They were both arrogant and inferior. This time, they had planned for a long time and had chosen Jiang as their first battle. They would definitely make this battle a grand one. He Yan said, "Water counters fire. Water and fire are incompatible. Why don't we use fire to attack?" For a moment, no one spoke in the study. "Miss He, please explain more clearly," Cui Yu said. Cui Yu's attitude towards He Yan became more and more respectful. He felt that this girl was very different from other girls. She was also very different from Xiao Ju's other subordinates. For example, Fei Nu and Qi Wu were also Xiao Ju's subordinates. However, they only listened to Xiao Ju's orders. Xiao Ju would not let them express their opinions like this. He Yan had always been very respectful towards Xiao Ju, but if one looked carefully, it did not seem like a relationship between a superior and a subordinate. Cui Yu was a big-hearted person. He could not tell if He Yan loved him or not. However, he could feel that He Yan regarded him as the same as Xiao Ju. If she were a man, she would probably be more like a good friend to Xiao Ju than a master and servant. The Yudo's boat might be very big. At least, it won't be like the small boats in Jiang City's army that transport goods or people. The Yudo kingdom is far away on land and there is no sea around it. It seems that they are not as good at water as the people in Jiang City. I think that the biggest possibility is that they will take a big boat to the edge of Jiang City. They will go ashore at the place Cui Zhongqi pointed out. She pointed at the place Cui Yu had marked. If their boats are very close to each other, we can use fire to attack. Once the fire spreads, the small boats in Jiang will be able to quickly leave, but the Yudo's big boat will not. We can take this opportunity to eliminate the Yudo's main force. Using fire to attack on the water was a method that no one had tried before. For a moment, no one said anything, but He Yan's words made everyone suddenly see the light. Their hearts faintly stirred up, secretly thinking about the feasibility of this plan. The Yudo's military strength is much greater than ours. They also know that Jiang has been peaceful for many years and is not a match for the Yudo. They must be proud and short-sighted. This is their weakness, but it is our strength. When she spoke, her voice was gentle and firm, clear and organized. Every word seemed to be able to give people endless confidence. Just now, everyone thought that they would definitely lose this battle, but after hearing her words, they felt that they might be able to create a battle in the history books where they won the battle with a small number of people. This battle would be admired by the world. It was just that. Cui Yuji looked at He Yan doubtfully. In such a short period of time, she had thought of a way to deal with it. Although it wasn't flawless, it was unique and pointed out the key to victory or defeat. Could an ordinary woman really do this? Not to mention a woman, even a man who had been in the army for many years might not be able to react so quickly. After all, a general not only needed experience, but also a little talent and a unique vision. However, how old did He Yan look? He heard that she was only 17. A 17-year-old girl was already so powerful. Xiao Ju's subordinates were already so powerful. Wouldn't the 9 Flags barracks be filled with crouching tigers and hidden dragons? Cui Yuji felt a faint chill in his heart. I'm just suggesting this idea, He Yan said. I'm not sure if it can be implemented or how it can be implemented. He Yan knew that he had said too much, so he consciously passed the words to Xiao Ju. Whether this plan will work or not, it depends on the commander-in-chief's decision. She did not need to say this, but it was the responsibility of every general to treat every battle seriously. Moreover, Jiang City was a good place, and the people were very warm and honest. She was not willing to let this beautiful place, which was like a paradise, be destroyed by the Yudo. After all, if the Yudo took over Jiang, they would only go all the way north, and the people of Dawei would suffer. She would fight until the end. Everyone looked at Xiao Ju. Xiao Ju's gaze swept past He Yan. She stood up and walked to He Yan's side. He Yan lowered his head, avoided Xiao Ju's thoughtful gaze, and returned to his position. He picked up the charcoal pencil that Cui Yuezhi had put aside and circled it in front of the mark that Cui Yuezhi had just made. He then made a new mark. The new mark was in front of the old one, which was also in front of the shore of Jiang City. There was a narrow exit. This was the place where the canal and the river in Jiang City met. It was like the mouth of a gourd, sharp and thin. Only after passing through the mouth of the gourd could they reach the real canal. Fire attack is feasible, but we can set up an ambush here. This passage is narrow, so large ships cannot enter. Small boats can pass through it. Cui Yuezhi's eyes lit up. Xiao Ju had sharp eyes. This place was very suitable for an ambush. As for fire attack, Xiao Ju said, it depends on the wind direction and the terrain. There are people from the Directorate of Astronomy in the city who are in charge of observing the weather and wind direction. A Jiang soldier said, they can be used to make arrangements for the planting of paddy fields in the farms. Another person asked hesitantly, but what if the wind direction is opposite on that day? Then we can't use fire attack. Xiao Ju said, after all, war is about the right time, the right place, and the right people. He Yan thought to himself, that's true. Everything is indispensable. Of course, Xiao Ju did not finish his sentence. If the wind direction was opposite on that day, there would naturally be other ways. However, when it came to war, it was all about luck. If God did not let you win, there would be many examples of failure on the verge of success in the history books. What they needed to do was to minimize the possibility of these uncertainties. The discussion on the water attack lasted until midnight before the crowd finally dispersed. At first, everyone was listless and disappointed. Later on, they were full of energy and high spirits. It was all because of the ridiculous idea that He Yan came up with. Lin Shuanghe saw that the group of people's expressions were very different from when they first came out. He asked them in surprise, "What happened? What did you do inside? Why are they so happy?" He Yan yawned. "Of course, we used reason and emotion to persuade them." "That's not necessary," Lin Shuanghe muttered. "If I didn't know better, I would have thought that you guys were drinking wine inside." He Yan was speechless. She said, "It's getting late. I'm going to rest first. If there's anything else, we can talk about it tomorrow." Lin Shuanghe nodded. "Okay." He Yan returned to her room. During the day, she was correcting the formation of Jiang City's army in the training field. At night, she was discussing the map. She was already very tired. After she washed up, she walked out and saw Xiao Ju still sitting at the table in the inner room. He was writing something with a brush. He Yan went over to take a look. He had somehow obtained a copy of the map that Cui Yuezhi had hung on the wall of the study room. However, it was a smaller copy. He put the copy of the Yudo's defense map that Chu Xiao had given to Mu Hongjin and compared it with something. What he wrote was what He Yan had just mentioned. It was about the various aspects that they might need to pay attention to when attacking with fire. For example, how many ambushes should be set at the mouth of the calabash, the direction of the wind on that day, the arrangement of the city gates, and the guards in the city. Because there were too few soldiers in Jiang City, they had to be extremely cautious even if they had to arrange a soldier. She was simply like a little wife who lived frugally to manage the family. He Yan said, "Commander-in-Chief, why aren't you sleeping? Go ahead." Xiao Ju didn't even raise his head. He Yan sighed in his heart. He thought to himself that one only needed to be talented to get first place when they were young. Even if they slept in class, they could still get first place. However, maintaining first place for many years was not something that could be done with talent alone. Back when she was in the Fuyue army, she was also like this. She had even seen the moon in the middle of the night from 1 to 3 in the morning. Thinking of this, she said, "Commander-in-Chief, let me help you." As she spoke, someone knocked on the door outside. It was Lu Buang. "He, are you asleep?" It was already so late. Why was Lu Buang still looking for her? He Yan and Xiao Ju looked at each other and said, "No, master, please wait a moment." She put on an outer robe and opened the door. Lu Buang was standing outside the door. He had just returned from outside the residence, and his clothes were still covered with the cold dew of the night. He Yan looked outside the door and said, "Come in and talk." Lu Buang entered the door and saw Xiao Ju. He nodded slightly to Xiao Ju as a greeting. His gaze fell on the scroll in front of Xiao Ju. He paused for a moment and then said, "Commander-in-Chief, do you have a way to deal with the Battle of Jiang?" He Yan said, "A little bit." "What are the chances of winning?" He Yan said, "At most 50%. It would be best if it was 50%. Lu Buang was silent for a moment and said, "The Yuto may take action soon." Xiao Ju looked at him and asked, "Master Lu, what have you found?" "The Yuto I've been tracking have already gone in one direction. Some of them went out of the city, and some of them disappeared. They have noticed my whereabouts. The news of Her Highness evacuating the people can't be kept a secret." Lu Buang said, "The Yuto's ship hasn't arrived yet. We have to race against time now. In the shortest time possible, the people of Jiang should evacuate as far as possible, but there are civilians in the city who can't leave." Lu Buang's voice sank. He didn't want the civilians to be slaughtered by the Yuto. "Master," He Yan said, "don't you know how to do divination? Have you ever divined whether this battle will be won or lost?" "No solution." He Yan asked, "No solution?" In fact, many years ago, when Lu Buang was still a teenager, he had divined the opportunities of Jiang City in the next few decades on the mountain. The divination showed that decades later, there would be a great disaster in the city. Corpses would be piled up, and there wouldn't be any chickens or dogs left. Even Dewey was the same. Wang Chao's fate was about to end. He wanted to continue divining, but Taoist Yun Ji, who happened to see it, smashed the tortoise shell with his palm and reprimanded him. The heavenly Tao is unpredictable. How can you peek into the heavenly Tao? The matter was left unsettled. Many things happened later. He also knew that the affairs of the world were unpredictable. Compared to the heavenly Tao, human strength was too insignificant. Lu Buwang hadn't divined for many years. However, ever since he met He Yen this time, he knew that there might be a war in Jiang City and that the Yudo didn't come with good intentions. In the end, he couldn't stay out of it, so he secretly divined again. Divinations could never see the cause and process. They could only see the ending. He still remembered the result of the divination many years ago. However, decades later, the divinations were completely different. This was originally a dead end, and there was no chance of survival. However, he still saw the same scene as back then, but in the picture, there was an additional pair of blurry shadows. The shadows were golden and seemed to have infinite merit. They were as panicked as the sky, and like two bright golden lights, they illuminated the dead divinations. A dead end became an unknown because of this pair of blurry shadows. He couldn't see the ending. Chapter 153. If he couldn't see the outcome, it meant that it wasn't completely hopeless. As for the person who changed the outcome with his own strength, Lu Buwang didn't know who he was either. There was a rule in the sect that divination could only ask about things, not people. It was because of the saying, man can conquer nature. People who weren't completely controlled by the Tao of heaven. We have the geographical advantage. The mouth of Jiang City is our natural advantage. Moreover, those Jiang City soldiers grew up by the water and are good at swimming. In terms of manpower, now that we're here, we'll try our best to avoid mistakes. The only difficulty now is actually the weather. He Yen looked at Lu Buwang and said, if the wind blows from the southeast that day, it will be our victory. If the wind blows from the northwest that day, even the heavens will stand on the side of the Wutua. The direction of the wind determined whether they could use fire to attack, and fire was the most likely way to win. Military Governor Xiao. Lu Buwang looked at Xiao Ju. Even if the people in the city evacuate, if the Yudo attack in a few days, the city won't be able to defend, and the lives of the people in the city won't be guaranteed. Those people who have evacuated now will also be caught. Xiao Ju said, therefore, the later the Yudo attack, the better. If the Yudo attack soon, then the longer they defend the city, the better. You mean? Lu Buwang seemed to have sensed something. Now, we can only defend the city. Not only defend the city, He Yen said. If we want to take the initiative to attack, we can only use fire. But in this battle, it was not only the generals and soldiers, but also the blessings and luck of the heavens. I understand. Lu Buwang said, I'll think of another way. Commander-in-Chief, you should also prepare in advance. He looked worried. The Yudo will attack in 3 days at the latest. In fact, everyone understood that the so-called 3 days was already the best situation they estimated. In order to prevent too many people from evacuating the city, the Yudo would definitely send troops in a very short time. Both sides were simply fighting for time. That was what He Yen and the others thought, but what they didn't expect was that the Wutua people were even more impatient than them. The next night, a loud horn sounded from the north of the canal, and thousands of large ships appeared above the canal, bringing with them the ferocious Wutua people and long knives. The soldiers were at the city gates. Mu Hongjin sat in the middle of the hall. The servants around her all stood with their heads lowered. The atmosphere was heavy and stagnant. Only the woman was the same as before. She calmly ordered the servants beside her, let the soldiers at the entrance of the prince's mansion go to the city gate. Your Highness. If the city gate is lost, I won't live alone either. Instead of guarding the palace, it's better to guard the people. Mu Hongjin said calmly, I'm their princess, so it's only right. Her attitude was firm. The servant hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he still did as she said. Mu Hongjin raised her eyes and looked at the painting of Jiang in spring on the wall. The bustling flower market and the lively crowd were so lively that it seemed like they would walk out of the painting in the next moment. The battle was about to start. The princess was as beautiful and arrogant as ever. She was calm and powerful, without the slightest bit of panic. It was as if what happened outside was just a small disturbance that was not worth mentioning. As long as she listened to the zither and watched the dance, everything would be resolved. Father, the red-robed woman murmured in her heart. Your daughter has already guarded this city for more than 20 years, and will continue to do so in the future. The people of this city are so pure and kind. The water god will protect them. They will definitely get through this difficult time. Jiang City had not had a battle for many years. When the battle started, the old, weak, sick, and disabled in the city who could not leave in time all woke up from their dreams. They either sat quietly in their houses, waiting for the end to come, or crawled on the ground, silently praying for the Bodhisattva's protection. Cui Yuezhi changed into his armor and hung his long knife on his waist. He then left the mansion. There was no panic in the Cui mansion. Even the servants did things calmly. The few concubines did not play or laugh. They stood obediently in the room, waiting for orders. Concubine Wei said, Do your own things. Master has not returned, so no one is allowed to speak carelessly. As Cui Yuezhi's family members, they could have left, but they chose to stay and advance and retreat with Cui Yuezhi. If the city was breached, these weak women would not be able to gain any advantage in the hands of Yuto. Therefore, everyone, including the third concubine, who loved to cry and frown the most, prepared a white silk cloth. Their lives belonged to them. Once the city was breached, they must not fall into the hands of Yuto. Cui Yuezhi left the mansion and rode to the martial arts fields camp. As soon as he arrived at the camp, he dismounted and saw a person walk out of the tent. It was Xiao Ju. After taking off the exquisite robe that he usually wore, this young man did not look like the noble young master of the capital. He wore a black armor robe and a pair of cloud-climbing boots. The armor shone with a cold light, adding to his majesty. He had a handsome appearance, but his aura was as sharp as a long knife. Like the sparkling sword on his waist, it was impossible to ignore its sharpness. Military Governor Xiao. Cui Yuezhi looked into the distance. Before long, the morning light would illuminate the sky of Jiang City. Yuto's ship would also arrive. It was a critical time. The Jiang army in the city is all here. I will lead a group of people to set up an ambush at the mouth of the gourd. Commander-in-Chief, lead the others to board the ship and fight head-on with the Jiang army. As for the fire attack, his expression became serious. The people from the Directorate of Astronomy had already observed the sky last night. There might be no wind today, or there might be a southeast wind. However, even if there was a wind, it would be in the afternoon. However, if it really was in the afternoon, Yuto might have already come ashore. The only thing they could do was to wait here for a possible southeast wind. For this possibility, they had to prolong the battle and try their best to delay the Yuto on the water. Xiao Ju led the Jiang army to complete this difficult task. However, this was not the only difficult task. There was also the person who set the fire. They had to secretly set fire on the Yuto's ship at the right time. With so many ships, it was impossible to set them on fire one by one. They had to observe the position of the ships and find the most important ones. Then, they had to use the fire on those ships to quickly spread the fire to all the Yuto's ships. This required a good view of the overall situation, as well as good judgment. Looking at the entire Jiang city, it was rare to find someone who could do this. Cui Yuezhi was also in a difficult position, but he had no other choice. He could only wave his hand behind him. A group of people walked over. The leader was Mu Yi, who had fought with He Yan in the martial arts arena. I found a soldier and asked him to listen to Mu Yi's orders. We will find an opportunity to board the Yudo's ship. When the southeast wind arrives, we will take the opportunity to set fire. We can't be sure which ships can be controlled, so we can only ask Mu Yi to burn more. The more they burned, the higher the possibility of being discovered. It was even possible that they would be trapped on the ship. In a way, this soldier who set the fire was equivalent to the soldiers of the Vanguard Battalion. They were Vanguard Battalion soldiers who were ready to sacrifice themselves. They would use their sacrifice to pave the way for their brothers. Mu Yi said to Xiaoju, "Mu Yi, do your best." Everyone now knew how unfavorable the situation was for the Jiang army. Mu Yi was no longer as arrogant as before. His expression was much more solemn. "Cui Zhongqi, leave the matter of setting fire to me." A voice cut in. The curtain was lifted and someone walked out. It was He Yan. She was also wearing the Jiang army's robes and her long hair was tied up high. She had bright eyes and white teeth. She gave off a completely different feeling from before. They did not know if it was an illusion, but everyone felt that this girl was more eye-catching when she was dressed like this. It was extremely natural. The armor was heavy, but she walked with ease. Her expression was also very calm. She looked at Xiaoju and said, "Commander, let me set the fire." "Miss He." Mu Yi wanted to dissuade her. "It's very dangerous. There are too many Yudo ships. We might have to wait until the afternoon for the uncertain southeast wind." He Yan shook her head. "To hide among them and not be discovered, you need not only skill, but also physical strength. You also need to know how to coordinate with the Jiang army led by the commander. Brother Mu Yi, you have never fought side by side with the commander before. Even if you set the fire, you two will not be able to get used to each other in a short period of time. I am the commander's subordinate, and I have a tacit understanding with him. It is best for me to lead you." She smiled faintly. "Didn't you already fight with me in the martial arts arena? Why do you still have so little confidence in me?" Mu Yi's face turned slightly red. He was momentarily speechless. Since he had lost to He Yan, it meant that his skills were inferior. How could he refute? He Yan's words were half true and half false. The truth was that she could indeed cooperate better with Xiaoju. It was the same with Yuan Baozhen in Liangzhou City. Moreover, there were many ideas that could be thought through between generals. If Xiaoju could think of it, so could she. At the same time, Xiaoju could also understand her hint. If it was Mu Yi, he might not be able to understand. Secondly, she could also see that Mu Yi was determined to die, and intended to exchange his life for success. However, on the battlefield, it was the general's responsibility to try to avoid unnecessary sacrifices. Although she did not dare to say that she could lead this group of people to retreat unscathed, at least they would not be completely wiped out. Whether it was for public or private reasons, it was better for her to do this dangerous task than for Mu Yi. Cui Yuji was somewhat hesitant. That day when they were discussing fire attacks, he already knew that He Yan was not simple and could not be underestimated. He was also much more capable than Mu Yi. However, he was not familiar with He Yan. He did not know how far he could go. Moreover, He Yan was not his subordinate. Even if he agreed, Xiaoju could not do anything about it. Therefore, he looked at Xiaoju and said, "Miss He's abilities, of course I believe in Miss He's abilities. I am also very assured that Miss He will do this. However, I do not know what military governor Xiao thinks." Xiaoju looked at He Yan, and He Yan looked back at her. Her gaze was clear and full of vitality. She was wearing the armor, looking heroic and high-spirited. It illuminated her entire face. She was like the young man who shone in the martial arts arena of the Liang province guards. Her movements were as nimble as the wind. The wind of freedom should not be trapped in a small place. The corners of his mouth twitched slightly. He said calmly, "Go." He Yan said, "Thank you, military governor." She originally thought that Xiaoju might not agree and that she would have to persuade him. She did not expect that he would agree so readily today. However, Xiaoju could probably see that it was better for her to go than for Mu Yi. As the main commander, every order he gave had to be fair. Be careful, Xiaoju said, there is no need to rush. If the situation is not right, retreat. I have other ways. He Yan said, understood. He Yan led Mu Yi and the others forward. Excluding herself, there were a total of 50 people. These 50 men were the 50 best fighters in Jiang City's army. Because they had to hide in the dark, ambush, hide, set fire, and retreat, they might have to fight with some Yudo. Therefore, they could not be weak. He Yan looked at them and thought of the vanguard battalion that he had been in. In the vanguard battalion, there were more than 10 people who rushed to the front of every battle. However, these dozen or so people would be different every time, because most of the time, they would never return. However, it was also because of them that the army was able to create the possibility of victory. At the mouth of the gourd, Cui Yuezhi led the troops to guard it. Xiaoju led the main force on a boat to fight with the Yuto on the canal of Jiang City. Before she left, Xiaoju did not give her any specific instructions. In other words, from now on, the initiative of their secret arson operation was in He Yan's hands. Miss He, Mu Yi looked at her. What should we do? Time gradually passed and the sky was about to brighten. There was not much time for them to hesitate here. Although Mu Yi knew that He Yan's skills were outstanding, he was not confident that He Yan could command a surprise attack. He did not even know that He Yan was the one who proposed the fire attack plan. He only thought that He Yan had the same idea as him, to use his skills to sneak onto the Yudo's ship and set fire to the Yudo's ship. Should we prepare the ointment now? Mu Yi asked. He thought that she had not thought of a way and took the initiative to remind her. We will hide the ointment on the shore and think of a way to transport it onto the Yudo's ship. How about it? No need. He Yan raised his hand and said, prepare 10 small boats. 10 small boats? Mu Yi frowned. Now that the ships have been given to military governor Xiao, there are not many ships at the moment. Why do we need so many ships? He Yan said, I thought about it. It is much harder to burn their ships one by one than to burn our own. Why don't we burn our ships? Mu Yi was stunned. The dozens of people behind him did not understand. Someone asked, what do you mean? Can you explain it more clearly? I need 10 small boats. Put all the ointment that you have prepared on the 10 small boats. Then pile them with hay and pretend that they are the same as the other warships. When the two sides fight, the Yudo will think that they are just small boats piled with ointment, the same as the ships of Jiang City's army. When the southeast wind blows, we can pretend to fight them and get closer to the Yudo's ship. At that time, we can set fire to our own ship. This is the only way to have the highest chance of success. You can also jump into the river and save yourselves. She said. Chapter 154. When these 50 people first accepted Cui Yuezhi's orders, they never thought that they would come back alive. When they heard He Yan's words, they froze on the spot. After a while, someone asked, is this feasible? I'll attract the Yudo's attention from the front, He Yan said. However, your boats will need to be arranged according to my arrangements. She had never set up a formation on the water before, but she couldn't care less at the moment. However, He Yan looked at the distant sky. There was a ray of light at the end of the sky. The sky was about to brighten. Would there be any wind today? Would the heavens be on their side? But no matter what, fighting was their destiny. Pick up the sabers in your hands and follow me, she said. Dawn finally broke, and the last bit of darkness dissipated. A red sun rose from the front of the canal, accompanied by clouds and mist. Golden light spread across the entire river, and Jiang City was enveloped in a splendid glow. The soldiers on the city tower blew the horn. At the embankment, the Jiang army was ready to set off. Their boats docked at the shore like dense black iron. A dark spot gradually appeared in the distance. Slowly, the dark spot grew bigger and bigger. At first, it was a flat line. Then, the line became wider and longer until it covered a large area of the canal. Everyone could see clearly that it was the Yudo's boats. The Yudo's boats were extremely tall. At the bow of the boats stood the Yudo soldiers. They were all wearing leather robes and small round hats made of black lamb skin. 2 red belts were attached to the back of the hats. They were all tall and strong. Before they even got close, they laughed loudly and intimidated the Jiang army. Commander-in-Chief, a deputy soldier behind her said in a trembling voice, "Their men, at least 150,000, Xiao Ju said. 20,000 against 150,000. This was no longer a battle of numbers. The disparity was so big that it made people feel desperate. Follow me onto the boat." Xiao Ju took the lead and stepped onto the small boat on the shore. Compared to the Yudo's ships, the Jiang City Army's ships were too small. The Yudo soldiers had come up from the north of the canal, and it was a long journey. The ships were large and sturdy, and it was unknown what kind of wood they were made of, but it should be very precious. In recent years, De Wei had been busy quelling the chaos in the western Chang and southern barbarians, giving the Yudo an opportunity. Unknowingly, the wealth of the Yudo kingdom was not to be underestimated. Its treasury might not be any weaker than that of De Wei. The soldiers of Jiang City followed the Xiao Ju onto the ship, and the ship headed in the direction of the Wu Tua army. The leader who led the troops to Jiang this time was the Yuchuo general Maka. Maka was actually not very tall. In fact, compared to the bodyguards around him, he was rather short. He was not very old and had just stood up, but he was already very famous in the Utopia kingdom. This was because he was extremely adept at sneak attacks. Furthermore, because he was the cousin of the king of Wutua kingdom, the king had entrusted him with an army of 150,000 soldiers, allowing him to fight his first battle in De Wei. Maka was determined to win over Jiang. The spies hidden in Jiang City had already found out about the current situation in Jiang City. The territory of a vassal king did not have many soldiers and horses, and it had been peaceful and happy all these years. Conquering such a city was actually a piece of cake. The only problem was the princess of Jiang, Mu Hongjin. This woman was very cunning, but she was only a woman. However, there seemed to be more people in Jiang City these days. It was said that a white-clothed swordsman was chasing after the spies of the Utopia kingdom. It was unknown if the news had been leaked, but the commoners of Jiang City had already begun to evacuate. In order to avoid any more trouble, they decided to take action in advance. "Is the one leading the troops this time Cui Yuezhi?" Maka asked. "I heard that he was also a fierce general when he was young, but now that he's old, I wonder if he still wants to use his blade." His trusted aides around him roared with laughter. "He can't compare to the general's blade." Maka stroked the scabbard on his waist. "If he really dies under my blade, it'll be his glory." His laughter drifted over the river and landed in the midst of Jiang City's army. Xiao Ju stood at the bow of the boat and watched as more and more Utopia soldiers appeared in the distance. After a moment, she curled her lips. "Idiots." "What?" The deputy soldier was puzzled. "All the Utopia soldiers are lined up at the bow and stern. Looks like they're afraid they won't die quickly enough." Xiao Ju stood up and walked inside. She grabbed the cloak in Qi Wu's hands and tied it around herself. "Try to stay on the water for as long as possible. There's no need to stop someone who's rushing to their death." At the same time, He Yan also boarded a small boat filled with ointment. The ointment and firewood on the boat were tightly covered with thick linen cloth. It looked no different from the ordinary boats of Jiang City's army, and there was a military flag on top of it. The 50 people were divided into 10 groups of 5. He Yan and Mu Yi were on the same boat. She said to the others, "Follow me from afar. Don't come close." She took out a piece of paper from her bosom and casually picked up a charcoal pen from the ground to draw a picture. "Look at this." There were a few boats drawn on the map, and the one in the middle was circled by He Yen. I'll use this boat to attract the attention of the Wutua people. The rest of your boats will be arranged according to the directions I drew. When I give the signal, you must burn the boat and jump into the water. Can you do it? Miss He, someone said worriedly. Why don't we do it instead? It was too dangerous to act as the Yudo's bait. If they weren't careful, they could lose their lives. Although no one was willing to die, they couldn't watch a girl take the lead and face danger alone. Don't worry, I have my own plans. He Yen tightened the whip around her waist and took the lead to walk towards the boat. The commander-in-chief has already boarded the boat. Let's set off too. The boats met at the canal in front of the city gate. Jiang City's army looked as small as ants against the countless Yudo boats. However, the youth standing at the front of the boat was dressed in black armor. His posture was as straight as a sword, and he was as beautiful as a spring willow. However, he held a long sword in his hand, and his aura was as cold as a blade. The morning sun shone on his body, giving off a myriad of brilliance. He was so cold that one couldn't look at him directly. This was an unfamiliar man. Maka was slightly stunned. She asked the person beside her hesitantly, "This isn't Cui Yuezhi." "Who is he?" Cui Yuezhi was a fatty, not a handsome man. However, Cui Yuezhi wasn't here. Where did this person come from? Was he a new talent in Jiang City? However, the secret letter sent back by the Yudo spies never mentioned this person. Since he was not an outstanding person, why would Mu Hongjin hand over the small number of city guards to him? I've never seen this person before. The subordinate beside her said hesitantly, maybe Cui Yuezhi can't do it anymore. There's no one in Jiang City, so Mu Hongjin found someone to replace him. This person is so young. It's obvious that he's not a match for the general. Maka didn't say anything. As a general, he naturally had an intuition as to whether the other party was an embroidered pillow or a real person. This person didn't look ordinary. Maka was puzzled, but he didn't have time to think about it. He slowly pulled out the long sword at his waist, pointed it forward, and shouted, "Warriors, follow me." For a moment, the shouts of fighting shook the sky. Yudo also knew that once they went ashore, there would be nothing that could stop them. Jiang City was as fragile as paper. 20,000 people weren't even enough for them to play with. In order to protect the civilians, Jiang City's soldiers could only fight more on the water. Fighting on the water was nothing. Their boats were big and sturdy. Killing people on the boats only caused them to shake a little. When the big boat met the small one, it was like a big fish meeting a small fish. It was cruel and intense. The big boat almost smashed the small one. However, the small one was nimble and knew that there were reefs hidden in the water, so it cleverly avoided them. The two armies fought on the boats. To catch bandits, first catch the leader. Maka's target was the young man wearing black armor and holding a sword. When the two boats approached each other, he stood at the bow of the boat and looked at the person on the opposite boat. "Commander-in-Chief." Someone shouted beside him. Maka narrowed his eyes, "Commander-in-Chief. Who are you?" "Xiao Huijin." Maka felt that this name was familiar. However, he was usually extremely arrogant. Other people's names were just names in his ears. He would forget them after hearing them for a moment. Moreover, no one would have thought that Xiao Huijin would appear in this place. For a moment, he only said, "Never heard of him." However, one of his subordinates said with uncertainty, "Xiao Huijin, is he De Wei's General Fengyun?" "General Fengyun?" Maka was startled and looked at the person in front of him. As long as he mentioned General Fengyun, the commander-in-chief of the Right Army, no matter how arrogant he usually was and how he looked down on these soldiers of the Great Way, he still knew who the other party was. Xiao Huijin had never lost a battle. He was brave and fierce. Even if they hadn't fought, it was enough to intimidate Yudo. "Are you De Wei's General Fengyun?" he asked. Xiao Ju looked at him calmly and said coldly, "Yes. Maka suddenly held his blade in front of his eyes. His relaxed expression suddenly disappeared. Although he didn't know if it was true, but from the young man in front of him, Maka believed 90% of it. This person had an extraordinary aura. Moreover, if he wasn't such a person, how could Mu Hongjin be willing to hand the Jiang City army to him and let Xiao Huijin command it? He didn't even use his trusted aide Cui Yuezhi. In the letter sent back by Yudo's spies, there was no mention of this. Maka was flustered and exasperated. Amidst his uneasiness, there was a faint eagerness to try. Xiao Huijin was indeed not simple. However, he only had 20,000 men. 20,000 against 150,000. No matter how he looked at it, he didn't look like he was going to win. So what if he was a brave general? Just based on these shrimp soldiers and crab generals? These pitifully small boats? If he led the Yudo to defeat Xiao Huijin, he would be the one who defeated Dewey's general Fengyun. In the Yudo kingdom, he would be bathed in glory for the rest of his life. For a moment, Maka's blood boiled. He roared, "Brave warriors, kill them all. Occupy their cities, take their wealth, and enjoy their women. Kill! 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 Kill!" Deafening shouts rang out, spreading across the canal. The Yudo were cunning and cruel. They were addicted to killing. At this moment, they were provoked by Maka's words. They raised their blades and charged forward. Close quarters combat, bathed in blood. The shouts reached He Yan's ears. He Yan looked into the distance. On the surface of the river, two armies stood together. Mu Yi asked, "Military Governor Xiao has already made his move. We should approach them now." He Yan shook his head and looked at the sky. At this moment, the sky was clear and cloudless. There was not even a trace of wind. Her heart gradually sank. The people from the Directorate of Heavens had said that there might be no wind today, but even if there was wind, it would not be at this time. But, would there really be wind in this kind of weather? Would the heavens really stand on Jiang City's side? She looked at the Yudo Kingdom's ships in the distance. The Yudo Kingdom's ships were huge and heavy. They were especially famous above the canal. As she looked, she was suddenly startled. A moment later, a smile appeared on her lips. Mu Yi asked, "What's wrong?" "Miss He, what are you smiling about?" "I'm laughing at the Yudo's stupidity." She said, "Look at the heads and tails of those ships. They're all linked together." The Yudo kingdom was not a water town like Jiang, and the soldiers were not good at water. Therefore, all the ships were chained together at the head and the stern. The Yudo probably felt that this would save them a lot of effort. It would also prevent one of the ships from being unable to keep up with the rest. At a glance, it looked like a fleet. When sea merchants were transporting goods, this was a common method. However, it was a bit cumbersome to use it here. Especially today, they wanted to use fire to attack. Mu Yi's eyes lit up. "We just need to set fire to one of their ships." But soon, he became worried again. Their ships are chained together. Once a small boat enters, it'll be like a sheep entering a tiger's den. I'm afraid that the Yudo will surround the boat before it can be burned. "Don't worry." He Yan called for the rest of the people to board the ship. "Stay where you are on the map. I'll bring a ship and lure them over." "Lure them over?" Mu Yi asked, "How?" It was not worthwhile for the Yudo to chase after a single ship. It was possible before, but now that so many ships were chained together, they would probably keep an eye on the Xiao Ju's Jiang army. "I have my ways," He Yan said. Just as he finished speaking, a man's voice was heard. He Yan turned his head. When he saw that it was Chu Zhao, he was slightly startled. "You asked Cui Jiao to go to the prince's mansion to get his highness's clothes. It's not safe outside, so I asked Cui Jiao to go back to the Cui mansion first and bring it to you." Chu Zhao smiled. "Fortunately, I made it in time." "Brother Chu, why are you still in Jiang City?" He Yan asked. It's not safe here. You should have left with the evacuating people. This person did not even have the ability to protect himself. If the Yuto entered the city, he would probably be in danger. Even His Highness stayed in the prince's mansion. How could I abandon my comrades? Jiang is also Dewei's land. He can protect the people in Jiang. Although I'm not as good as He, I won't run away alone. I'll advance and retreat with my friends. But you don't know martial arts. He Yen thought for a moment. Forget it. Wait a moment. She jumped off the boat and walked towards a tent by the shore. She went in for a moment, then jumped out again. She was holding something that looked like a piece of clothing. She stuffed it into Chu Zhao's hands. I bought this from the embroidery workshop in Jiang City. It's made of mermaid yarn. I heard from the shop assistant that it's invulnerable to swords and spears. Although I don't know if it's true, if you wear it, it'll be able to protect you. He Yen sighed in her heart. She originally wore the clothes under her armor because she thought that it was better than nothing. If it really was a treasure, she would just treat it as wearing 2 sets of armor. However, when she saw Chu Zhao standing there so weakly that even a gust of wind could blow him away, she felt that it would be better to give the clothes to him. Although she did not know if this person was an enemy or not, he asked Cui Jiao to go back to the Cui mansion first and did not leave alone. He was loyal. Chu Zhao was stunned. Just as he was about to speak, he saw that the girl had already turned around and followed the crowd onto the boat. Her back view looked extremely elegant, and she was quickly drowned out by the people around her. The boat gradually left the shore and headed towards the center of the river where the battle cries were the loudest. There, the light of swords and the flames of war swirled. The boat was like a moth flying into a flame. It swayed and swayed, but there was no turning back. Chu Zhao looked down at the clothes in his hands. It seemed that the clothes in his hands had just been taken off a woman's body. It was still warm. She really did not care about trifles. However, he slowly lifted the clothes. The skirt was long. It was a woman's dress. He was stunned for a moment. Then, he shook his head and laughed. The people in the city hid in their houses. They closed the doors and windows tightly. The young were held in the arms of the old. They stared at the doors of their houses as if they were staring at all their hope. Time slowly passed. There was not a single person on the streets. Jiang City, which was usually bustling, was as quiet as a ghost town today. In the prince's mansion, Mu Hongjin sat in the hall and looked outside. The windows were wide open. The willow branches were as gentle as usual. The sky was clear and there was no wind today. She lowered her eyes. Her fingertips gradually dug into the soft cushions of the high seat. There was no wind today. At the mouth of the bottle gourd, the soldiers hiding in the dark were like sure too. They were silent and quiet. The archers were hiding in the dark. They were waiting for the Yuto to come ashore to ambush them. Cui Yuezhi stood behind a tree. His face, which was always smiling, was unusually solemn today. There were 150,000 Yuto. They did not even need to fight. Once they entered the city, the remaining people in the city, old and young, would have no way to survive. If they rushed a little faster, the people who were still fleeing on the road would also face a disaster. He had brought a portion of Jiang City's soldiers here to prevent them from coming ashore and entering the city. He wanted to become the last line of defense in front of the city gate. However, if the Xiaoju could not eliminate the main force of the Yuto, most of the Yuto would make it here. They would definitely not be able to stop the vicious wolves heading into the city with just the few of them. They could only do as He Yen had said last night. They could use fire to wipe out all the Yuto in one fell swoop. Only then would they be able to stop the remaining Yuto that had escaped the net. However, could the fire attack technique really work? A Jiang City's soldier was lying in the grass with a bow and arrow on his back. The long grass covered his face and made his face slightly itchy. However, he still remained motionless and did not even have the intention to scratch it. He was not the only one who remained motionless. The grass in front of him, the flowers blooming by the roadside, the calm water surface, and the soft dandelions, all remained motionless. There was no wind today. Cui Yueji's heart gradually sank. There was no wind today, and the weather was not good. With less than 20,000 soldiers in the Xiaoju's hands, he was afraid that they would not be able to compete with the Yuto without using fire. Their so-called ambush here might end up becoming the prey of the Yuto. But why was there no wind today? The Xiaoju's master, the white-clothed swordsman who looked very powerful, said to him with certainty, "Don't worry. There will definitely be wind today." The people from the Directorate of Astronomy said that there was a 50% chance that there would be wind today. However, Lu Buwang said, "Arrange an ambush. There will definitely be wind today." They had heard that lay Buddhist Lu Buwang could perform divination, so they believed him without a doubt. Or perhaps, they were deceiving themselves and hoping that he was telling the truth, so they believed him. But now, there was no wind. By the way, where was Lu Buwang? Only then did Cui Yuezhi remember that he had not seen Lu Buwang since he woke up early this morning and left the Cui mansion for the tent in the martial arts practice field. There were slight waves on the water surface. It was not the wind, but the fish in the water. The spring grass by the embankment was red and green. Deep in the forest with strange stones, someone was sitting on the ground with a guqin in front of him. The man was dressed in white, and his robe was clean and spotless. His appearance was particularly elegant, and there was a sword at his waist. He looked like a chic Jianghu swordsman. Lu Buwang looked up at the sky. The sunlight shone in the woods, casting a golden shadow. It didn't make people feel hot, and the warmth was just right. This was a spring day brimming with vitality. Every new patch of green carried the feeling of spring as it fell into the gentle land of water. The sounds of fighting in the distance were in sharp contrast to the tranquility here. Not far away, there was a clear distinction. The wind hadn't come yet, but Lu Buwang knew that the wind would definitely come whether it came earlier or later. Many years ago, there was no chance of survival in the dead end. Many years later, there was a glimmer of hope. At first, he didn't know who those two shadows were, but now it seemed that they were most likely his disciple, He Yan, and the young and valiant right military governor, Xiao Huaijin. These two people were generals who had fought on the battlefield for many years. They had already saved many people's lives, which was a merit. Heaven would not treat people with merit too harshly. Wherever they went, they would be blessed by good fortune. Perhaps it was because of their righteousness and light, even the death chess game in Jiang City had a glimmer of hope. These two people could bring the death chess game back to life. Although they couldn't see the end, they could see a glimmer of hope. Since there was hope, it meant that the road wasn't a dead end. Therefore, the wind would definitely come. Although it might not come too early, the wind would definitely come. What he had to do was to grasp that chance of survival tightly and help these two people completely revive this chess game. The sounds of fighting in the distance seemed to be getting closer. This wasn't an illusion. Lu Buwang looked forward. Several large ships were sailing this way. Yuto wasn't a fool. He wouldn't be hindered by Xiaoju all the time. While their main force was fighting with the Jiang City army led by Xiaoju, another team took advantage of the chaos to sneak ashore. As long as they got ashore and took control of the entire Jiang City, it was only a matter of time before they won the naval battle. Cui Yuezhi's men were at the mouth of the calabash, which was still some distance away. They thought they were the first line of defense, but in fact, they weren't. Lu Buwang was the first line of defense. Among Taoist Yunji's 7 disciples, he was the best at the art of Qimen Duanjia. Over the years, he rarely used this technique because it was extremely energy-consuming and damaged his body. He was no longer the young man from back then. Even though his white clothes were fluttering in the wind, his hair had already turned white. However, he would always stay here and guard her city. Lu Buwang plucked the zither strings. Chapter 155. The grass was green, and sometimes there were flowers. Amidst the chaos of bees and butterflies, the sound of the zither strings was clear and long, slowly drifting to the surface of the water. It was really eye-catching for such a person to play the zither in such a chaotic situation. The white-clothed swordsman sat quietly. As his slender hand stroked the strings, the sound of the zither flowed out. It was still the song, Slow Time. In fact, he could play many songs, but over the years, he had played this song the most. He had set up a formation around him, and the sound of the zither also had the ability to confuse people. When Yuto arrived here, he would be confused by the formation, and it would be difficult for him to find the entrance. He could stall for more time for Cui Yuezhi and wait for the late arrival of the east wind from God. Yuto's ship was slowly approaching, and someone got off the ship aggressively. Lu Buwang sat quietly, as if he was meditating on Qian Mountain back then. He was calm and unhurried. Taoist Yunji didn't praise him, but he had always been very tolerant of him. Everyone always said that he was the best among the 7 senior brothers on the mountain back then. His senior brothers always laughed and joked that he would bring glory to the sect one day. But he had been expelled from the sect long ago. The sound of the zither paused, as if disturbed by a foreign object, and he played the wrong rhythm. Lu Buwang was slightly absent-minded. Back then, he met Mu Hongjin at the foot of Qian Mountain. Later, he learned that Mu Hongjin was the beloved daughter of King Mengji in Jiang City. Mu Hongjin didn't want to marry the son of an important official in the court, so she begged Lu Buwang to take her away. Lu Buwang hesitated for a long time and decided to let her wait in the inn. He returned to Qian Mountain with his junior sister first and reported this matter to Taoist Yunji. But once he went up the mountain, he couldn't come down again. It was already a year later when he went down the mountain. Mu Hongjin always thought that he lied to her and deliberately told King Mengji about her whereabouts. He was the one who sent Mu Hongjin back to King Mengji's mansion. In fact, that wasn't the case. Back then, Lu Buwang did go up the mountain in a hurry. When he went up the mountain, he told Taoist Yunji that a girl who ran away from her marriage was forced by her family and was now resting outside. He hoped that Taoist Yunji could find a way to let him take Mu Hongjin up the mountain. Lu Buwang was honest and kind by nature. For the first time, he lied to Taoist Yunji. He only said that Mu Hongjin was a girl from an ordinary family, and did not mention that she was the daughter of Prince Mengji. Lu Buwang was worried. Once Taoist Yunji knew Mu Hongjin's true identity, he might not save her. However, Taoist Master Yunji knew better than him. Are you talking about Mu Hongjin from Prince Meng's mansion? Lu Buwang was stunned. Master, you're so stupid. Taoist Master Yunji looked at him and scolded him with a sullen face. Do you know who she is? She was the only daughter of King Mengji and would inherit the throne in the future. The reason why King Mengji arranged this marriage for her is because she will become King Mengji's daughter. You were so careless as to bring her up Qian Mountain. Do you know what kind of disaster you will bring to Jiang City? How much trouble would it bring to Qian Mountain? Even if you don't care about the lives of the people in Jiang City, your senior martial brothers grew up with you. Don't tell me you don't care about their safety. Master, it's not like that. Lu Buwang argued. Taoist Yunji sighed and said, do you think King Mengji will let go of Qian Mountain if he knows that you hid his daughter here? He won't know. Buwang, you're too naive. Taoist Yunji flicked his sleeves and said, give up. I won't do anything. Lu Buwang knelt on the ground. After thinking for a while, he stood up and bowed to Taoist Yunji. I understand. What do you want to do? I'll think of a way myself. Lu Buwang thought that although he was not as capable as Taoist Yunji, there was always a way out. He must be able to think of another way. The most important thing now was that he had to go down the mountain first. The day he agreed to meet Mu Hongjin was approaching. Are you still going to find that woman? Lu Buwang said, yes, I've already made an agreement with her. Taoist Yunji said, you can't go down the mountain. What? I can't watch you destroy Qian Mountain, Taoist Yunji said, you must stay on the mountain. Master, she's still waiting for me. Taoist Yunji's face was completely ruthless. Lu Buwang slowly pulled out the long sword at his waist. He didn't want to fight with his master, but he was really anxious. However, his swordsmanship was not as good as Taoist Yunji's, so he was defeated in the end. Taoist Yunji locked him in a water cave on the mountain. The cave was surrounded by waterfalls and fragrant orchids. Just looking at it, the scenery was very beautiful. But Taoist Yunji had also set up a formation around him, so he couldn't leave the formation and could only be trapped here. Lu Buwang's Chimen Duanjia couldn't be compared with Taoist Yunji's after all. He begged Taoist Yunji in despair, Master, I just need to go down the mountain and say something to her. I can't go back on my words. She's still waiting for me. Master. If you can solve my formation, you can go down the mountain. Taoist Yunji turned and left. Lu Buwang was meditating in the formation and trying to solve it. But this formation was even more powerful than all the formations he had encountered in the past. He was anxious and kept solving the formation day and night. Finally, he fell ill and lost his energy. Yu Shu came to see him and gave him medicine. Seeing Lu Buwang covered in wounds, she was very distressed and said softly, Senior Martial Brother, why are you doing this? Can you beg Master to let me out? Lu Buwang leaned against the stone wall of the cave and was dying, but his tone was still stubborn. I want to go down the mountain. Yu Shu took a step back and couldn't help crying and shouting at him, so what if you go down the mountain? She's already married. She didn't wait for you. Mu Hongjin has already married her husband. Lu Buwang widened his eyes slightly. He was in the mountain and in the formation, so he couldn't sense the changes in time outside. He could only count the days. Every other day, he would carve a stroke on the stone wall. Looking back, more than 200 days and nights had passed. That girl, who was wearing a red dress with bells on her long braids and always stuck to him with a smile, was already married. What kind of mood did she have? Was it the hatred of not waiting for him and being stood up, or was it the despair of being forced to get into the bridal sedan? Lu Buwang's heart ached violently. She didn't wait for you. She has already forgotten your agreement. His junior martial sister stood in front of him and said with tears in her eyes, so, you should also forget her. Forget her? How was that possible? He didn't know when he was in love with her, but he only knew when she left. He had long been used to the days of being relied on, pestered, and deceived. Even though he was angry, he enjoyed it. How could he forget her so easily? When was she found by the people of the mansion, and when did she get married? He asked slowly. Yu Shu answered, not long after you left, she was found by the soldiers. She got married not long after. Senior Martial Brother, she still wanted to persuade him, why don't you go and admit defeat to Master and live a good life on Qian Mountain in the future? Don't mention that matter again, okay? Lu Buwang didn't speak. Senior Martial Brother. He raised his head. The young man's eyes, which had always been clean and clear like the warm sun in spring, were now a little cold and distant. Yu Shu was also frightened by his eyes. You can go. Lu Buwang said, don't come back in the future. He worked harder to solve the formation and studied it. He ignored whether his body could bear it or not, and there was only one thought in his mind, he wanted to go down the mountain. Lu Buwang's Chimen Duanjia advanced by leaps and bounds in this day of hard work. At the same time, he also noticed that the power of Taoist Yunji's formation was gradually weakening. Another spring day came, and he broke out of the formation. The spring rain with the green grass under the eaves, and the young man's white clothes were splashed with mud. He was completely undecided, and he walked firmly step by step. The senior martial brothers and junior martial sisters surrounded Taoist Yunji's bed. After such a long time, the formation was getting weaker and weaker. It wasn't his illusion that Taoist Yunji's time was coming. Lu Buwang was stunned. He rushed to Taoist Yunji's bed and knelt down. Taoist Yunji looked at him and asked, "Have you broken the formation?" Lu Buwang nodded. His master reached out and touched his pulse slightly. He sensed something inside deeply. "You still want to go down the mountain?" he asked. Lu Buwang knelt upright and said, "Yes." There was a long silence. "You can go." The master who raised him said word by word, "From now on, you are no longer a member of my sect. Don't go up Chiyin Mountain again." "Master." The senior martial brothers were shocked and pleaded for him. Taoist Yunji didn't speak. He closed his eyes, and when he looked again, he had already passed away. In a single night, he had lost the master who had raised him and the right to stay on Chiyin Mountain. After burying Taoist Yunji with the senior martial brothers, Lu Buwang went down the mountain alone. After this farewell, he knew that it would be forever and never be able to meet again. His wound hurt faintly. Breaking the formation by force like this had hurt his foundation after all. It was raining heavily. Without an umbrella, he stumbled on the muddy mountain road without stopping all the way. Finally, he reached the foot of the mountain and entered Jiang City. The city was as lively and warm as that spring day. There was no difference at all. Lu Buwang walked to Prince Mengji's mansion. He hid under the eaves opposite the mansion, wearing a bamboo hat, and wanted to see Mu Hongjin. He didn't know what to say when he saw Mu Hongjin. He was the one who failed to keep the appointment, and he was also the one who was late for more than a year. He was the one who asked her to wait for him, and he was also the one who didn't come. But if she wanted to leave and shook his arm like back then, asking him to take her away, Lu Buwang thought that he might still be helpless and do as she wished. Then he saw Mu Hongjin. Unlike the arrogant girl back then, she had become more beautiful. Wearing an exquisite and luxurious robe, she got out of the carriage and said something to the man beside her. The man beside her also looked gentle. He hugged her waist from behind, and his robe couldn't cover her slightly bulging belly. Mu Hongjin was pregnant. The legendary, bad old man, was not old, and his gaze was very gentle when he looked at her. She looked back at him with a gentle gaze, completely different from the arrogant and willful girl in his memory. The rain wet his boots and robe, but Lu Buwang felt that it was not as embarrassing as him at this moment. They were in harmony with each other, and they were a loving couple. They looked like an immortal couple, while he stood here, looking out of place. But why should he make Mu Hongjin wait here all the time? This girl was as bright and lively as the peach blossoms at the foot of Chiyin Mountain. Beautiful people or things were always discovered by others. Just as he fell in love with her unknowingly, Mu Hongjin's husband was the same. Mu Hongjin already had her own peaceful life, so there was no need for him to disturb her. As if his gaze was too hot and painful, Mu Hongjin seemed to feel it and looked back. Lu Buwang turned slightly and hid under the shadow of the eaves. "What's wrong?" The man beside her held her hand and asked. "Nothing." Mu Hongjin shook her head. "It's probably my illusion." The rain was cold. He was obviously hiding under the eaves, so why did it wet his cheeks? He seemed to taste bitterness at the corner of his lips. It turned out that the spring rain was also not sweet. He strode away. The sound of the zither was poetic and picturesque, covering all the murderous intent in the jungle. Some Yudo stepped in without noticing and suddenly screamed. For a moment, there were screams. Finally, someone realized that something was wrong and stopped the people behind him. "Don't come in. There's an ambush." Lu Buwang smiled slightly. After leaving the mountain that year, he had been silent for a long time, like a walking corpse, not knowing what he could do in the future. He could neither return to Chiyin Mountain nor find Mu Hongjin. For a time, he felt that living in the world was meaningless. Until Yushu found him. His little junior sister was not as cute as before, and she was much more haggard. Standing in front of him, Lu Buwang suddenly realized that Yushu was also a big girl, no longer the little sister who ran around behind him. "Senior martial brother," the girl looked at him with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry." "What?" He didn't understand. The reason why Miss Mu was found by the soldiers of the prince's mansion was that I told on her. Lu Buwang's expression froze on the spot. I like you very much. I don't want you to be with her. Yet, Yushu seemed to want to speak out all her faults in one go, as if she was seeking release. I eavesdropped on your conversation, so I told Meng Ji Wang her hiding place. I thought that as long as she got married, you would forget her and stop thinking about her. I didn't expect you to be so stubborn for so many years. I'm sorry, I was wrong, she burst into tears. I hurt you, senior martial brother. I'm sorry. She cried to her heart's content, but Lu Buwang was like a stone, his whole body stiff and cold. He was young and ignorant, and his mind was rough. He didn't see the deep affection in his little junior sister's eyes when she looked at him, nor did he see the hostility that flashed by when Yushu looked at Mu Hongjin. A girl's love and hate came directly and simply. She only cared about venting when she was angry, but she didn't expect that she would miss a pair of lovers. It wasn't until the world changed and the regret snowballed that she realized her mistake. How could you do this? For the first time, he got angry at Yushu. Did you know, he didn't continue. What did he know? Back then, he didn't know that he loved her so deeply. He was like a fool. Eldest martial brother, who came after hearing the news, found him and said, Little Seven, don't blame Yushu. She was young and ignorant, and now she knows that she was wrong. Also, don't blame Master for not saving you and locking you in the formation on Qian Mountain. Lu Buwang replied blankly, I didn't blame anyone. He only blamed himself. Do you know why Master locked you in Qian Mountain back then? Eldest martial brother said, Master has always been kind and generous. Since he adopted us 7 orphans, so what if Mu Hongjin is the princess? If Master really wanted to protect her, why would he be afraid of the danger brought by this identity? Lu Buwang looked at him, not understanding what he meant. Master did it for you. Taoist Yunji once divined for Lu Buwang, and the divination showed that one day, he would die young because of a woman. Deep love would kill him. You are Master's favorite disciple. Master was afraid that you would lose your life because of Mu Hongjin, so he locked you in the formation. Eldest martial brother said, although he was biased in his actions, he did it wholeheartedly for you. Lu Buwang felt that it was ridiculous. It was just a divination. How could he miss it like this? Taoist Yunji did it for him, so who could he blame? He could only blame the fickleness of the world. He had been staying in Jiang City, hiding in the dark, and doing the same things as before every day. Until one day, Yushu was arrested by Mu Hongjin's guards in the temple. Yushu didn't have the guts to assassinate her. As soon as the news came out, Lu Buwang knew that Mu Hongjin was forcing him to show up. Not only was he not angry, but there was even a trace of joy in his heart. After so many years, he could finally see her in broad daylight. He saw Mu Hongjin in the temple hall in the middle of the night. Time had polished her to be even more magnificent and beautiful. She was like a ripe honey fruit, and her whole body was full of unspeakable flirtatiousness and wildness. Lu Buwang thought bitterly in his heart, who made her like this? Was it her current husband? Well, they even had a child together. She had already gotten married and had children, and was getting further and further away from him. The woman's red robe was gorgeous, and the golden crown slightly reflected sparkling colors in the night. Her eyes were even brighter than this. She stared at him, and there was no longer the naughtiness and innocence in her eyes from many years ago. He had thousands of words to say to her, but in the end, he didn't know where to start. In the end, the sentence he spat out was, "Where is Yushu?" Lu Buwang still remembered Mu Hongjin's gaze at that time, which seemed to be a little shocked and a little understanding. The moment he said that, he instantly regretted it. He shouldn't have been so blunt. He should have said something else. Asking her how she had been all these years and apologizing for breaking his promise back then was better than questioning her. Mu Hongjin looked at him as if she was looking at a stranger, and she replied lightly, "In prison." The conversation between the two of them was as distant as that between strangers, as if they were standing on opposing sides, and there was no longer the intimacy of the past. Lu Buwang was very conflicted. He wanted to stay here, talk to her more, and look at her more. But he was afraid that if he stayed here for too long, he wouldn't be able to control himself and reveal his feelings, which would cause trouble for Mu Hongjin. It had been a long time, and he didn't arrive in time back then. Now, Mu Hongjin already had someone else by her side, and she no longer needed him. Why should he come to disturb her and ask for a snub? He wanted Mu Hongjin to release Yushu and catch him. Taoist Yunji raised him, and Yushu was his daughter. He couldn't watch Yushu be imprisoned. Besides, Mu Hongjin's purpose of catching Yushu was him. Lu Buwang thought that Mu Hongjin must hate him very much, but people were stingy to show a trace of affection for things they didn't care about, so Mu Hongjin hated him. Perhaps, after so many years, she still had a little bit of love left. She's just a junior sister. You're so protective of her. Do you like her? Lu Buwang answered, yes. What did you say? Lu Buwang looked at her, as if he wanted to engrave her appearance at this moment in his heart forever. He said word by word, I like her. He admitted that he was the one who told on her, that he lied to Mu Hongjin and made up a promise casually, and that he had never liked Mu Hongjin. Mu Hongjin smiled. Her smile was contemptuous and sarcastic, as if his likes and dislikes were so insignificant and ridiculous. She wanted Lu Buwang to be her lover as a condition for letting Yushu go. Lu Buwang was furious. He was furious that she humiliated him and her like this. But in his anger, there was a faint desire. He was horrified to find that he had never given up in his heart. It was as if there were countless fire seeds buried in the ground. As long as she said a word, they could easily break out of the ground and start a prairie fire. He agreed. But Mu Hongjin was unwilling. Mu Hongjin wanted him to get out of Jiang City with Yushu and never set foot here again. She wanted to draw a clean line between herself and Lu Buwang so that they would never cross paths. This was the last time he talked to Mu Hongjin. Lu Buwang later changed his name to Layman Yunlin and traveled around. He went to many places. He was dressed in white and his swordsmanship was outstanding. Everywhere he went, people praised and admired him. But he was always cold and cheerless, as if he didn't care about anything. He also never saw his own senior brothers and Yushu again. In this world, everyone ultimately had to become their lonesome self. But he still returned to Jiang City every year during the Water God Festival. He secretly entered the city without anyone knowing, just to take a look at the city that Mu Hongjin was guarding. It was as if he was guarding her. Fushi's divination only asked about things and not people. This was a rule he set for himself later. It was inevitable to foresee twists and turns when doing divination for others. In order to avoid twists and turns, he tried his best to avoid some encounters that might bring misfortune. But he didn't know that every encounter in the human world had its own precious fate. While avoiding the calamity, he had also fallen into another trap of fate, just like himself. He regretted it all his life. He was close at hand but couldn't get it. In the depths of the dense forest, the screams became louder and louder, and more people came ashore. His zither music gradually became more and more intense, like a golden spear and armored horse, looming in the formation filled with killing intent. The formation wasn't omnipotent. The more people there were, the shorter the time it could be maintained, and the more energy it needed to consume. Back then, on Qian Mountain, when Taoist Yunji locked him in the formation, in order to get out as soon as possible, he ignored his injuries and forcibly broke the formation to study it. In the end, his mind was hurt. Over the years, he had never set up such an energy-consuming formation. A trace of blood slowly flowed out of Lu Buwang's lips. In the spring light, he smiled calmly, as if he was out of this world for the first time. It was as if he was still the young swordsman in white, standing in front of his sweetheart. Chapter 156. Battle cries filled the air on the canal as boats collided with each other. The Yuto surrounded the Jiang soldiers like vicious wolves. They outnumbered them, and the archers on the boats were ready. Arrows flew like shooting stars and pierced the boats of the Jiang soldiers into sieves in the blink of an eye. They could no longer sail. Although the Jiang soldiers who fell into the water could swim, they could not exert their strength in the water. The Yuto had also prepared many pitchforks, which looked like the tools fishermen used to spear fish. However, the tips were forged and sharp. They stabbed the Jiang soldiers who had fallen into the water. The water of the canal was quickly dyed red with blood. A young Jiang soldier dodged the sharp arrows shot from the Yuto's boat and jumped into the water. Dozens of Yuto laughed and stabbed him with the pitchforks in their hands. The Wutua people were strong to begin with, and the young man was only 16 or 17 years old. He couldn't dodge in time and was stabbed in the arm. Immediately after, the pitchfork stabbed at him from all directions, piercing through his body. The pitchforks were quickly retrieved, leaving a bloody hole in his chest. He struggled for a while and sank. Only blood was left on the surface of the water, proving that he had been alive. The deputy soldier looked back and shouted at the young man in the middle of the chaotic battle, "Commander, we can't do it. They have too many people." There were too many people. 2 fists were no match for 4 hands. They were outnumbered. This was not Gua City in the past. The only way to win by surprise was to attack with fire, but they still lacked an east wind. "No, we can't." Xiao Ju held a long sword in his hand. His gaze was as sharp as a blade. He said coldly, "Fight." Since he was the leader, he had been entangled in a chaotic battle. Maka was not a brainless person. Although he was arrogant, he had heard of Xiao Ju's name. Previously, he had used the Western Chang people as bait to ambush the Liangzhou guards. However, Xiao Ju's sudden return had disrupted the plan. Maka clearly remembered that the leader of the Western Chang, Rida Muzi, was extremely strong and fierce. However, he had died at the hands of Xiao Ju. Maka wanted to win. He wanted to take down Jiang City and claim credit from the monarch, but he did not want to lose his life for nothing. As he pushed back, he shouted to the Utaibin beside him, "His Majesty said that whoever takes Xiao Huijin's head will be the greatest contributor to this battle and will be conferred a noble title. Warriors, kill him." The motivation of military exploits was always useful at times like this. When the Yuchuo soldiers heard this, their blood boiled, and they immediately swarmed in front of Xiao Ju. This was the scene that He Yen saw when he approached with his boat. The young commander-in-chief's cloak left a dark mark on the surface of the water. His long sword was as cold as ice, which made his handsome face look like a Rakshasa. He could take someone's life with a snap of his fingers. Wave after wave of people surged forward. Corpses had already piled up around him, but there was no sign of fatigue on the young man's face. He was as valiant as ever. "We can't go on like this." He Yen frowned. There were too many Yuto. One Xiao Ju could fight against 10, or even 100, but what about 1,000 Yuto? What about 10,000? What about 100,000? Of course, he could fight his way out of the encirclement alone, but as long as the Yuto didn't come ashore, he would always have to stand in front of the civilians. The remaining Jiang City soldiers weren't enough to form a tacit understanding with him and cooperate seamlessly with him. Qi Wu and Fei Nu had both been arranged by Xiao Ju to Cui Yueji's side. He could only fight by himself. He Yen thought for a moment, then said to the other people on the boat, "Do as I said. Row the boat to the position I drew and wait for orders. Don't go too far." "Mu Yi," she said to Mu Yi, "take this boat and follow me." After saying this, she put on Mu Hongjin's robe that Chu Zhao had given her. "You?" Mu Yi was stunned. "I disguised myself as Her Highness the Princess to draw some people away," He Yen replied. "Otherwise, the commander-in-chief won't be able to hold on for so long. We have to disperse the Yudo's forces in order to delay them for a longer time." Even if you disguised yourself as Her Highness, Mu couldn't help but say, how do you know that they will definitely chase after us? You have to know. He Yen shook his head, destroy their strength, seize their crown, and disintegrate their bodies. When a dragon fights in the wild, its path is exhausted. Moreover, the Yudo would think that compared to capturing Xiao Huaijin, they would be more confident in capturing Mu Hongjin, a woman who didn't know any martial arts. She raised her head and looked into the distance. It was already noon, and the sun was high in the sky. It was already slightly hot, and there wasn't even a hint of wind. There was still no wind. He Yen ordered the other boats to row further away. He and Mu boarded the small boat alone and rowed in the direction of Xiaoju. However, they didn't row too close. They only stopped at a place where the Yudo soldiers around Xiaoju could see. They were a little anxious, as if they were lost. Where did that boat come from? Maka saw a small boat in the distance, on the other side of the soldiers' boat led by Xiaoju. This small boat looked exactly the same as the other boats of Jiang City's soldiers. There was a banner on it, but it was indescribably strange. This boat didn't get close to where they were fighting. Instead, it seemed like it wanted to escape. Deserter? Maka vaguely felt that something was strange. He ordered people to row the small boat to check it out. The small boat only rowed a little when the scout came back and reported, General, the person sitting on the boat seems to be Princess Mengji. She should want to abandon the city and escape. Maka's spirit rose, Princess Mengji. Did you see it clearly? This subordinate saw a woman wearing princess robes and a person dressed as a guard. I don't know if it's true. Maka thought for a moment, then said, Princess Mengji hasn't shown her face until now. She said she was in the prince's mansion to stabilize the soldiers' morale. I think it's very likely that she's planning to escape. That's right, she's just a woman. Without someone to rely on, she's probably already scared out of her wits. He laughed sinisterly, if that's the case, capture her. But his trusted aide beside him said, General, our boats are fighting with Xiao Huaijin. We can't capture Mu Hongjin. After all, Yudo Kingdom wasn't a water city. The Yudo soldiers weren't as proficient in water as Jiang City's soldiers. Moreover, they had come by water. The mountains were long and the water was wide, so they used iron hooks to connect the thousands of boats. At this moment, it was impossible to untie the boats. If they chased after Mu Hongjin, they would have to give up on the battle with Xiaoju. Idiot! Maka cursed. To catch bandits, first catch the ringleader. So what if she's Xiao Huaijin? Xiao Huaijin isn't the master of Jiang City. If we capture Mu Hongjin, the Jiang City army will definitely fall into chaos. At that time, we'll win without a fight. There was one more thing he didn't say. Compared to Xiao Huaijin, Mu Hongjin was a woman. She was much easier to capture. Once we capture Mu Hongjin, this general will use her to knock on the gates of Jiang City. Xiao Huaijin must obediently surrender. Otherwise, I'll kill this woman in front of the Jiang City army. Maka's smile contained cruel malice. What do you think Xiao Huaijin will do? With Xiao Ju's reputation as a cold-blooded and heartless jade-faced commander-in-chief, he wouldn't even care about his biological father. What was Mu Hongjin to him? He naturally wouldn't surrender. Furthermore, Mu Hongjin was going to die anyway. If she died because Xiao Ju refused to lay down his weapon, the Jiang City army would naturally resent him. At that time, there would be internal strife, and the morale of the army would be in chaos. Jiang City would be nothing more than a sheet of loose sand. It would only be a matter of time before it collapsed. Turn the ship around and follow me. Maka smiled. The Yudo soldiers beside him didn't continue to surge forward wave after wave. The ship at the front turned around and sailed in another direction. The Jiang City army stopped what they were doing and asked, what's going on? Why did they suddenly stop fighting? Even though the Jiang City army had been trained by Xiao Ju for a few days, they hadn't been trained for many years. Their formations were also old-fashioned. Xiao Zhu had only brought 15,000 men with him. At this moment, nearly half of them had been lost. If the Yudo pursued them, the situation would be even worse for the Jiang City army. However, at this critical juncture, they retreated. Xiao Zhu looked in the direction where the Yudo ships had left. On the vast river, there was a small boat with a banner. There was a red dot on the boat, which was like a bright signal on the river, attracting people to chase after it. "That's the princess," the soldier beside him muttered. "No, it's He Yan." Xiao Zhu's eyes darkened. After a moment, he said, "Follow them. They're catching up." Mu Yi said nervously. "Don't worry," He Yan said. "We only have 2 people on the boat. They're going after us, not the boat. You're a good swimmer. Later, hide in the water and don't show your face." "What about you?" Mu Yi looked at her blankly. "I'll give them a big gift." He Yan smiled faintly. She took out an iron ball from her bosom. This iron ball had barbs on all sides and was extremely sharp. It looked like the giant claws of a wild beast. She pulled out a long whip from her waist. There was a buckle on the iron ball, and she fastened it to the long whip. This, He Yan suddenly made her move. She threw the long whip in her hand at the reef. The iron ball sank into the reef, but it did not shatter. She quickly retracted her hand. On the reef, there were 5 empty holes. It was a frightening sight. If this thing was aimed at a person's heart, it could dig out a large piece of the person's chest. Mu Yi could not help but shiver. He knew that He Yan was not an ordinary girl. Her strength was astonishing. But seeing it with his own eyes, he was more and more shocked. "Miss He, you want to use this to fight?" This weapon was fierce, but it was not as agile as swords. She could only swing it once. Each whip could only kill 1 person. Before she could swing it a second time, the enemy would pounce on her. Moreover, what if the whip was cut in half? "No," He Yan shook her head. "I'm going against the boat." Mu Yi wanted to ask more questions, but He Yan pushed him. "Quickly get into the water." He subconsciously jumped into the water and hid behind the reef. He clenched the dagger in his hand. It was difficult to swing swords in the water. Only the dagger was agile. But it was not as agile as on land. The Yuchuo military ship was taller and flatter than the small boat in Jiang City. From afar, He Yan looked like a lamb forced into a strange path by a giant beast. "Your Highness," Maka stood at the bow of the ship and shouted. "Surrender. If you know what's good for you, maybe I will spare your life." He was determined to get Mu Hongjin. There was no one else on the small boat. Even the only guard was gone. Did the guards see that the situation was not good and left Mu Hongjin alone and ran away? TSK, the people of Dawei are always so weak. The red-robed woman stood at the bow of the ship with her head lowered. She did not say anything. The distance between the 2 boats was getting closer and closer. Just as Mako was about to order people to capture her, the woman suddenly raised her head and jumped from the boat. The small boat was not as tall as the big boat. She did not want to jump onto the Yuchuo military ship. Instead, she jumped onto the hull of the ship. Her feet stepped on the hull of the Yuchuo ship and swept past like lightning. Peng, 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 her speed was extremely fast. With every step, the whip in her hand would hit the hull of the ship. The iron ball hit the hull of the ship and was quickly taken away by the whip. Only 5 empty claw marks were left. Water poured in. What's that sound? What is she doing? Capture her. Quickly release the arrows. Quickly release the arrows. The arrows were like black rain falling from all directions. The woman easily dodged them as if she was walking on flat ground. As she moved, her robe fell with the wind, revealing the black armor underneath. She landed in the wind and stepped onto her own ship. Standing at the bow of the ship, she looked at the ship that was gradually tilting due to the water. Her lips curled into a mocking smile. I am illiterate. I don't know how to read. I don't know the word surrender. Her gaze landed on the flustered and exasperated Maka's face. Her words were as arrogant as usual. If you know what's good for you, kneel down and kowtow to me. Perhaps I will spare your life. Maka was stunned. After a while, he said angrily, you are not Muhongjin. How can a piece of trash like you trouble Her Highness to take action? He Yen said with a smile, Her Highness should stay in the mansion. I can fight 3 people like you alone. Maka pulled out the long blade at his waist. I think you are courting death. But as soon as he finished speaking, the boat beneath him sank. Just now, He Yan's whip had smashed the bottom of the ship one by one, creating a row of holes. At this moment, the water was pouring in and the ship was already unstable. The Utopian soldiers swayed left and right with the ship. The ship was gradually sinking. Quickly go to the ship on the side. In the chaos, someone said, no, the ships are all connected. We have to cut the iron hooks. For the sake of convenience, the ships were all connected head to tail. Now, it was a trap that they had dug for themselves. A large ship tilted and sank, dragging all the other ships with it. They could neither advance nor retreat. Cut the iron hooks. Quickly. The iron hooks were heavy and sturdy, not something that could be cut in 1 or 2 moves. The Utopian soldiers covered Maka and went to another ship. The rest of the people were carried by the sinking ship, frantically trying to cut the hooks. Voila! The iron hook was cut off and fell into the water, bringing the boat full of holes with it as it slowly sank. Some of the Utopian soldiers who did not have time to escape also fell into the water. Not everyone could swim. For a moment, the water was filled with cries and screams. It was very chaotic. Maka was furious. He looked up at the culprit, but saw that the girl had already taken advantage of the chaos to row the ship far away. Chase after her. Maka shouted. Catch her, I want to skin her. Being played by a girl in front of everyone was a great humiliation. How could he be willing to accept it? He Yen rowed the ship across the water and reached out to Muyi hiding behind the reef. He pulled him up. Quickly come up. Muyi jumped onto the ship. He knew that there was no time to waste, so he immediately began to row. But when he glanced at He Yen, he was shocked. He knew that He Yen was very strong, but with just her strength, she had overturned a ship, and it was not even a small ship. It was really shocking. Just now, He Yen had stepped on the ship's side and swung the whip smoothly. Those Yudo did not even have time to react before they fell into her trap. In Mui's heart, besides admiration, there was also a faint excitement. He said to He Yen, Miss He, can we do what you did just now and overturn all their ships? Impossible. He Yen replied quickly. Now that we are in such a critical situation, how can we directly use the Iron Tiger Claw? Then why don't you, do more? As soon as he said that, Mui also felt that he had gone too far. He Yen did not get angry. She only explained patiently, it's useless to do more. They don't have as much strength as I do. Even if they do have great strength, they may not be able to accurately hit their ships. Her skills had been honed through a long period of military campaigns in the past. Although the weapon was important, the person using the weapon was more important. Moreover, this method can only be used once. The Yuto are already prepared. I'm afraid that they have already prepared archers on the ship. Before we even get close, they will shoot. That whip just now was just to delay a little. The longer we delay, the greater our chances of winning. If we keep delaying, will the wind really come? Mui looked at the sky. Such a clear sky, but it filled his heart with haze. It was difficult for him to have any confidence. If Master says there will be wind, there will definitely be wind. He Yan's gaze was firm. If there is no wind, we will become the east wind. In short, don't stop fighting. She said, steer the ship in the direction of the ambush. On the other side, the Jiang City soldiers who were chasing after the Yudo soldiers also saw the scene just now. Everyone was stunned. He Yan's skill of smashing the ship with the whip was difficult to forget. Miss He is so powerful, someone murmured. It was not flattery, but even the most powerful person in the Jiang City army would not be able to do so. Strength and skill were secondary. What was more important was that she had to escape unscathed from so many Yudo soldiers. She had to grasp every moment with great precision. The Yudo's arrows were like rain. They were so dense, but they did not waver in the slightest. The ship was smashed, causing the Yudo to frantically cut the iron rings. Some Yudo who did not know how to swim were also drowned. The Jiang City soldiers, who had been suppressed before, felt slightly relieved. At this moment, they only felt happy. Xiaoju lowered her eyes and whispered, "I actually thought of something." She turned and ordered the deputy, "Take out the box." Before they boarded the ship, Xiaoju had ordered people to carry the box. It was very heavy. One person opened the box and saw that it was full of things like the end of the whip in He Yan's hand, which looked like a tiger's claw. However, there was no whip. It was a sharp weapon that could be worn around the wrist. The 20 elite soldiers who knew how to swim, "Step forward," Xiaoju said. The 20 elite soldiers who had been informed of the order in advance immediately stepped forward. Xiaoju looked at them and said in a calm and indifferent voice, "Take the iron claws and enter the water." In the distance, the large ship was chasing after He Yan's small boat with all its might. There were only 2 people paddling the small boat. How could it compare to the large ship? He Yan would be caught up very quickly. 20,000 against 150,000 was a very difficult matter. He also knew that this battle was difficult to win. Moreover, the heavens might not be perfect. He had to be fully prepared for everything. This box of iron claws was his secret weapon. However, he didn't expect that she had the same idea as He Yan. However, she was in the light, while he was in the dark. "Smash the ship," he said. The sound of the zither and the sound of fighting on the river in the distance formed a sharp contrast. The spring sun and the battlefield were 2 completely unrelated things. The sunlight shone on the man in white, making his clothes even cleaner. At a glance, it seemed that he was still the young man in white. A drop of blood dripped onto the zither in front of him. The zither string seemed to move and made a very soft sound. The seemingly clear zither sound also became sad because of this. Roars and shouts came from the depths of the dense forest. There were more and more Yudo, crushing and trampling the flowers on the roadside. However, they couldn't continue moving forward, as if they were imperceptibly hindered. The seemingly peaceful and happy spring scenery had become a killing weapon, and there were ambushes everywhere. More and more blood dripped from Lu Buwang's lips, and the sound of the zither became more and more urgent. There were too many people. His formation couldn't stop too many people. It was already very difficult for him to do this. The old injury from his early days in seclusion on the mountain started to ache again. Lu Buwang knew very well that he couldn't hold on for long. However, he still had to stop them here. The longer he stopped them here, the longer Cui Yuezhi's side could hold on. The more Yudo he killed here, the more time Cui Yuezhi's people could have. The people in Jiang City would be safer, and so would she. The peach blossom smiled sweetly out of the fence. It was the most affectionate of all. In his life, there was only one peach blossom that seemed to have bloomed. He couldn't see this peach blossom bloom to the end. It was good to take care of it a little longer. With a clang, the zither string in his hand seemed to be unable to bear it and suddenly broke. The zither sound stopped abruptly, and Lu Buwang spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood fell on the surface of the zither in front of him, and some splashed into the grass on the ground. It was like the peach blossoms in March, pretty and affectionate. Without the zither sound, the footsteps in the depths of the dense forest quickened and were right in front of him. Since the formation had been broken, he slowly stood up. "Who is that?" Who is it? Why is there only one person? Is there an ambush? After breaking the formation, the Yuto broke in. However, because of the ambush in the forest just now, he was afraid. Seeing that Lu Buwang was alone in front, he was afraid that there would still be an ambush around, so no one dared to come forward for a while. The two sides were in a stalemate for a moment. In the end, the Yuto was bolder because he had more people. After a while, he laughed and said, "It's just one person. Even if there is an ambush, there aren't many soldiers left in Jiang City. We'll kill as many ambushes as there are." "What are you afraid of?" The man in white in front of him didn't move at all. His clothes were neat and tidy, like an immortal. In the past, his black hair was tied up with white silk, and he looked otherworldly and cold. Now, his hair was gradually turning gray, but his back view, which was as reassuring as a tree, had never changed. He would always protect the people he wanted to protect. A gentle breeze blew past, causing his hair tie to sway slightly, causing his robes to sway gently, and causing ripples to appear in the man's watery eyes. He was stunned at first, and then a smile slowly appeared on his lips. The chance of survival in this death game had come. The hope of Jiang City had come. The wind had come. Lu Buwang slowly pulled out the long sword at his waist. Chapter 157. Above the canal, the battle was in full swing. Xiaoju ordered 20 elite soldiers to dive into the water with their iron claws and pierce through the Yudo ships. There were thousands of Yudo ships, and it was impossible to pierce through all of them. It was also difficult to exert their strength underwater. 10 people formed a group, and they picked the two in the middle to attack. As a result, the Yudo ships that were connected to the hooks were thrown into chaos. They hurriedly cut off the hooks and watched He Yan's boat escape in front of them. "These bastards!" Maka was furious. He snatched the bow from the soldier beside him and shot arrows at the soldiers in the water. However, the 20 selected were all experts in the water. They were agile and immediately avoided the arrows. They attacked when the enemy chased, and retreated when the enemy advanced. This caused the Yudo's pace to be disrupted. "Continue to use the pitchfork," Maka ordered with a serious face. "I don't believe that they can stay underwater forever. Capture that woman first." The woman who pretended to be Mu Hongjin had greatly humiliated him. The Yudo men were the most prideful. If they did not capture that woman today, his subordinates and confidants would secretly laugh at him. Even if they won the battle, when they returned to Yudo City, this matter would become a laughingstock and spread everywhere. Unless they captured that woman and ruthlessly tortured her, they would not be able to regain their dignity. "Chase after them." A slight breeze fell on their faces, causing a slight itch. It was very small, but it was immediately noticed. He Yan looked at Mu Yi. Mu Yi's eyes were filled with surprise. "There's wind." Although it was a gentle breeze, the heavens were on their side at the end of the day. The ships behind them were chasing relentlessly. He Yan's face sank. "Lead them into the ambush." "Yes." The small boat seemed to want to escape from the water, desperately rowing into the distance. However, compared to the tall ship beside it, it looked somewhat pitiful. "Where are they going?" the deputy beside him asked. Xiaoju looked in the direction He Yan's boat had gone. The canal was calm. If he remembered correctly, there should be several hidden reefs in the water in the direction she had gone. If it was a small boat, they could naturally avoid it. If it was a large ship, Xiaoju, follow them and disperse Yudo's forces. "Commander-in-Chief. The wind is blowing." He lowered his eyes and said coldly. The wind was still gentle, like the gentle frolicking of lovers, passing through everyone. Mui paddled with all his might and asked He Yan, "Miss He, can we start the fire now?" "No." He Yan said, "The wind is not strong enough." The wind was not strong enough. Even if a fire was lit, the thousands of Utho warships could not immediately sink into the sea of fire. They had all sorts of ways to put out the fire immediately. The timing of the battle was very important. What should we do now? They're about to catch up. Mu Yi was anxious. He Yan looked back and said, I'll hold them back. You? Mu Yi was worried. Can you do it alone? Let me accompany you. No need. He Yan patted him on the shoulder. You take this ship and stay in your position with the other ships. If the Utho warships see our ship, they will most likely come to deal with us. You must protect the ship. She paused and said, protect yourselves. But before Mu Yi could finish his words, He Yan had already stepped on the bow of the ship and swept towards Maka's ship. Miss He, why is he going alone? The deputy soldier was surprised. Xiao Ju said, let's do it. Bang! The small boat collided with the large ship, causing it to tilt slightly. Maka's face was ashen. Why are you still here? He laughed sinisterly. You want to stop a chariot with just a few thousand people? Since you want to die so much, this general will send you on your way. He waved his sword and shouted to his people, warriors, let's fight. The two sides stood together. Although the Jiang city army was outnumbered, they were not afraid. He Yan and Xiao Ju, who were in the lead, mingled with the people around Maka. He Yan had a whip with iron claws. When the iron claws were attached, they were very good at smashing ships, but they were also good at smashing people. When she waved her whip, a person would be knocked down. However, the whip was not a sword. When it pierced a person, it could not be retracted for a while. More and more Yuto rushed up, and they were already behind her. She kicked away a person in front of her, and a strong wind came from behind her. He Yan dodged to the side, and a sparkling sword blocked in front of her. Xiao Ju's back was facing her, and the sword in her hand was dripping with blood. She pulled autumn wine out from the Yuto's chest and reminded softly, be careful. Commander, He Yan said, let's fight together. The two of them stood back to back, one holding a sword and the other holding a whip. They had their backs to each other, and at this moment, they trusted each other wholeheartedly. They had never fought together against an enemy before, but in the face of life and death, they had a wonderful tacit understanding. It was as if they understood each other, and their hearts were connected. They did not need to remind each other of their actions, and they naturally understood each other's intentions. For a moment, the Yuto could not get close to them. The deputy commander pushed away a Yuto, and when she turned around, she saw this scene. She thought for a moment, and only said, what is the background of this Miss He? She is so skilled. She did not rely on Xiao Ju to save her, or Xiao Ju to protect her. She was able to cooperate with Xiao Ju at the same time. Not only did she not hinder Xiao Ju, she even cooperated with her with ease. General, this woman is so powerful. The trusted aide said to Maka. Xiao Huijin was powerful because he was the commander of the right army of Dawei, General Fengyun. He had never heard of this woman's name, and she did not look old. How could she be so powerful? Could it be that there were many talented people in Dawei's army, and Xiao Huijin was not the only one with such skills? For a moment, Maka regretted volunteering to come to Jiang. He saw that Jiang did not have many soldiers, and there was only one woman, Mu Hongjin, in charge. He thought that it would be easy to take down Jiang, and that was why he took the credit. Who knew that he would meet Xiao Ju, and a troublesome woman? When these two people worked together, their skills were already outstanding. There was also the Jiang City Army. Just a few days ago, the spy reported that the Jiang City Army had not fought for many years, and their formations were old. They were no match for the Yuto. When they fought today, they realized that the Jiang City Army's morale was high, and their morale had not decreased. Even their formations were different from before. Although the Jiang City Army was reduced by more than half, it was unimaginable that the 150,000 Yudo soldiers could not take down the city immediately. Instead, they had suffered a lot. Increase the number of people. Charge. Maka gritted his teeth as he looked at the man and woman surrounded by the Yuto. I don't believe that they can defeat my 150,000 soldiers. The mast on the ship did not move, but the flag hanging on it started to sway. It was not a slight sway like before, but a movement that could be seen, like a bird spreading its wings. The wind is blowing. He Yen could not hide the excitement in his voice. Commander-in-Chief, the wind is really blowing. It was not a gentle breeze, but more like a cool breeze. Perhaps it would become a strong gale or a strong gale. Furthermore, it's the southeast wind. He Yen smiled until his eyes turned into crescents. He was especially happy. It's the southeast wind, Commander-in-Chief. Xiao Ju glanced at him and said, we can lure them into the trap now. He Yen looked at him, and a smile flashed across his face. He jumped up and said, let's go. The two of them broke out of the encirclement and jumped onto a small boat of the Jiang City Army as if they were exhausted. The Jiang City Army on the boat paddled with all their might, as if they wanted to take them far away. Want to run? Maka sneered and waved his hand. Chase after them. We must take these two's heads today. At this juncture, the number of Jiang City Army soldiers was decreasing. It was obvious that Xiao Huijin and the woman were outnumbered. Maka had doubts in his heart. Was Xiao Huijin the kind of person who would abandon his troops and run away? However, this doubt was quickly washed away by the joy of the imminent victory. No matter how brave and invincible they would not be able to turn the tables with so few people. The people of the Great Way like to say the most, as long as the green hills remain, one need not worry about firewood. Perhaps the two of them saw that the situation was not good, and wanted to escape first, hide their strength, bide their time, and then make a comeback. Maka was going to chase them to the end today. His trusted aide was still a little hesitant. General, don't chase a cornered enemy. Why don't we wipe out the remaining Jiang City Army first? The right way is to go ashore and enter the city. What do you know? Maka said contemptuously. The Jiang City Army is already in shambles. If we capture Xiao Huijin. Greed flashed in his eyes. The king will only reward me generously. This is a battle achievement that will go down in history. Everyone in the Wu Tuo kingdom knew that he had led troops to attack the city. In the end, not only did he take down Jiang City, but even Xiao Huijin, who was feared by the world, died under his sword. Speaking of which, this life was worth bragging about. Moreover, he had suffered a lot at the hands of the woman who pretended to be Mu Hongjin. Maka was a person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance, so he could not be reconciled. For a moment, he only hoped to kill them all. Chase! The small boats moved quickly in front of them. Under the vast and mighty canal, there were countless unremarkable submerged reefs. The merchant ships that passed by were already familiar with this and avoided them from a distance. However, these Yudo might not know. They might not know what kind of sharp weapons were hidden in the small boats that were scattered all over the place. General, do you see those small boats? The trusted aide asked Maka. Dozens of small boats appeared around the surface of the water. These small boats seemed to belong to the Jiang City Army, but the people on them were not as large as the Jiang City armies. They were scattered at the ends of the boats. The faintly discernible distance seemed to be harboring evil intentions. The ominous premonition grew stronger and stronger. The trusted aide said, General, is this an ambush? Do you want us to? What ambush? If you're afraid, go back to your hometown as soon as possible. The Wu Tuo army does not raise cowards. Maka kicked the person beside him away. You call it an ambush with just these few boats? Are you trying to make me laugh my head off? We have so many boats and so many people. This is not an ambush, it's a suicide mission. I think it's a good idea. Get ready. When they get closer, shoot the arrows. The trusted aide thought about it and felt that Maka's words made sense. These Jiang boats were like moths to a flame. Even if they rushed over from all directions, they did not seem to have any chance of winning. He Yan's signal had already been sent out, and the other ships led by Mu Yi from before were all approaching this side. He Yan turned to look at the Wu Tua army's boats behind him. They were getting closer and closer. At the same time, the wind was getting stronger. The flags on the boat fluttered in the wind, and the joy in her heart rippled out layer by layer. She could not suppress it. Should we? He Yan asked Xiaoju. Xiaoju's mouth twitched. Yes. The two of them ordered the Jiang city soldiers around them to stop paddling. Quickly enter the water. Plop, plop, plop. The sound of people falling into the water came one after another. The people on the Wu Tua army's boats were stunned. They only asked, why did they all jump into the water? Prepare the pitchforks. Even if they fall into the water, we can still fight, Maka said gloomily. They just thought that they had exhausted all their abilities and were at the end of the road. He Yan smiled slightly. With one foot on the bow of the boat, he took out a flint. TSK. A very soft sound came from her hand, but no one took it to heart. The girl's eyes were bright, and she smiled slyly. I'll give you a big gift. Take it. A spark streaked across the sky like a shooting star. The next moment, it landed on the boat. At the same time, the sound of Jiang City's soldiers falling into the water could be heard from all directions. The spark landed on the opened curtain and the dry firewood covered in oil. With a loud boom, a huge ball of fire exploded on the boat, almost illuminating the entire sky. The Wu Tua army's boats were quickly engulfed by the fire. The wind became stronger and blew the entire flame towards the Wu Tua army's boats. The commotion on the canal seemed to have spread to Jiang City. Lin Shuanghe walked out of the Chui residence's backyard. He looked into the distance and muttered to himself, what's that sound? Beside him, Zhong Fu was also listening, but he could not answer his question. After a while, Zhong Fu looked at Lin Shuanghe and asked, Young Master Lin, are you really going to stay here? He already knew Lin Shuanghe's true identity. The so-called elegant butler Lin really did not exist in this world. At least, he had never seen one in his life. This young man looked refined and refined. He heard that he was a doctor, but he was different from Xiaoju and He Yan. He did not have any martial arts. Why would he stay here if he did not evacuate with the people? There are still so many sisters in this residence, Lin Shuanghe said with a smile. If I leave, who will protect them? Zhong Fu was speechless for a moment. He spoke as if he was very powerful. Cui Zhongqi's wives are still in the residence. Even my sisters dared to stay, so how can I escape alone? I am a man, Lin Shuanghe waved his fan, his smile as confident as before. A man should protect the ladies. Second concubine looked through the window at Lin Shuanghe, who was talking to Zhong Fu. She rested her chin on her hand and said, this young Master Lin looks so weak, but I didn't expect him to be so manly at critical moments. If I were 10 years younger, so what? Concubine Wei glared at her. You still have the mood to think about these things at a time like this. I was just saying it casually. Sister, why are you so agitated? Second concubine stretched lazily. It's hard to say if we can live past today. Can't you just let me dream for a while? Pay, fourth concubine said. Second sister, don't jinx it. Laoi will definitely defeat those Yudo. Not only can we live past today, we can live past tomorrow, and we can live for a very, very long time. Didn't Laoi say that young Master Qiao Huanqing is actually De Wei's General Fengyun? With General Fengyun, we can win this battle no matter what. Don't worry. She spoke quickly and anxiously, as if she was very confident. However, it was unknown whether she was comforting others or convincing herself. Third concubine loved to cry. Tears had swirled in her eyes for a long time. When she heard this, she finally could not hold it in. She cried and said, so what if he's General Fengyun? How many years has it been since we've fought a war in the city? We don't have as many soldiers as commoners. He's not a god. I'm still so young. I don't want to die. Leia hasn't doted on me for long. I'm so scared. Don't cry. Concubine Wei shouted with a sullen face. She saw third concubine shrink back and still could not hold back her tears. Finally, she sighed and handed her a handkerchief. Her voice softened. What are you afraid of? Although we're concubines, we're still people of the Middle Cavalry Manor. Without Leo protecting us at the front, we'll be dragging him down by crying and wailing in the back. Even if we're concubines, women, we're still women of the Middle Cavalry Manor. We must have integrity and not fear death. If we win this battle and Leo comes back alive, we'll celebrate. We'll prepare food and soup as a reward to reassure him. If we lose, Leo won't be able to come back. We won't beg for our lives under the Yudo's hands. The rope is in our hands. Everyone will die. It's just a matter of sooner or later. For better or worse, we sisters are in the same place. Even if there's no way to survive, we can take care of each other on the road to the Yellow Springs. What are you afraid of? She said. Second concubine giggled. Tears seemed to flash in her eyes. She smiled and held third concubine's hand. She only said, that's right. We sisters are in the same place. What's there to be afraid of? Third concubine sniffled and wiped away the tears on her face. She refused to speak. Fourth concubine looked out the window and muttered, it's windy. It's windy. Mu Hongjin looked at the trees outside the window. At first, it was just a small breeze. Then, it grew stronger and stronger. It blew the willow tree branches in all directions, as if they would be uprooted in the next moment. A layer of shallow waves appeared in the pond. Inside and outside the Wang Fu, it was empty except for a few old people who had always been by her side. She had let those who could leave. As for the commoners who followed them out of the city, if they could leave, then they could. There was no reason for them to be buried here in vain. What was that sound just now? She asked the maid beside her. The maid shook her head. That's true. Mu Hongjin sighed. How would you know? That loud sound was hair-raising. It could be heard both inside and outside the city. It seemed to have come from the direction of the canal. The servants who had been sent to gather information had come twice. They both said that the Yuchuo soldiers were currently fighting with the Jiang City army led by Xiao Zhu on the water. The Yuchuo soldiers had not yet come ashore to enter the city, but more than half of the Jiang City army had been lost. The situation was unbalanced, and they were no match for the enemy. This battle had truly been difficult for Xiao Huaijin. Mu Hongjin thought to herself. She somewhat hated her own incompetence. If only she knew how to mobilize troops and break through enemy lines, then she would not have to sit in this empty Wang Fu, futilely and powerlessly waiting for an end. If the city fell, she would be buried with it. If the city survived, she would continue to live. It seemed that this was all she could do right now. The wind blew in from outside the window and blew the mirror she had placed on the soft seat with a bang. It fell to the ground. Mu Hongjin was startled. She walked over and picked up the mirror. It had already fallen once, leaving a small crack on the mirror. This fall was even more vicious than last time. The crack covered the entire surface of the mirror. She had only just reached out to touch it when the mirror shattered. The shattered mirror fell onto the soft carpet. It was like a jewel falling into the sky, but also like a memory scattered in the depths of her heart. Her heart suddenly ached. She bent over, and for some reason, tears streamed down her cheeks. In the depths of the forest, the white-clothed swordsman was surrounded by several dozen Yudo. Blood dripped from the long sword in his hand. His white robes had long been stained red with blood. It was impossible to tell if it was his or someone else's blood. Go! The Yuto around him surged in wave after wave. This person's swordsmanship was superb. He was able to take on 10 of them by himself, and he had yet to fall. However, he had also suffered many injuries. His arm had been slashed by the Wutua's saber, leaving a long scar on his arm. His leg was also bleeding, but his posture remained light and graceful, like the clouds and mist on Qian Mountain, elusive and elusive. At the same time, he was like an immortal descending from the 9th heaven to experience a tribulation. He was always calm and always smiled. He made the massacre around him look like an immortal. He was like the heroic young swordsman in the stories of the past. With a sword and a zither, the sky was high and the land was wide. However, heroes also had times when they were defeated. Lu Buwang's eyes gradually began to blur, and his vision became blurry. He had spent a lot of energy setting up the formation just now, and it had affected his old illness. At this moment, he was just an arrow at the end of its flight. However, the longer he could hold on, the more peaceful Jiang City would be. The wind had gradually picked up. The smile on his lips grew brighter and brighter, as if he had listened to a girl in a red dress teasing him many years ago. He pretended to be bored, but he would turn his back and secretly smile without realizing it. A blade slashed at his face. Lu Buwang jumped to avoid it. As he moved, something flew out of his arms. He subconsciously reached out to grab it and held it in his palm. It was a silver bracelet. There was a circle of small wild daisies engraved on the edge of the bracelet. Because of the passage of time, the not-so-delicate edges had been worn down. It still had the body temperature of a person and was slightly hot. Someone once said to him, "This is called a happy bracelet. Give it to your sweetheart and wear it for the rest of your life." The 17-year-old Mu Hongjin begged him, "Young hero Lu, quickly give me one." However, he replied coldly, "She's not my sweetheart." However, when he went back to the mountain with Yushu and met the old woman again at the foot of Qian Mountain, he took out money to buy that bracelet. At that time, Lu Buwang didn't understand why he did this. He tried to convince himself that he was afraid that Mu Hongjin would be bored waiting in the inn alone. When she came back, she would definitely put on an act. So, this bracelet was a gift to shut her up. Unfortunately, he wouldn't have a chance to give it to her for many years in the future. Perhaps there had been a moment, or perhaps there had been many moments, when he really wanted to be with that beautiful and bright girl for the rest of his life. Poof! A long saber stabbed him from behind, and the tip of the saber pierced through his chest, as if it wanted to cut open his heart and let him see clearly who his sweetheart was. The Wutua behind him laughed heartily and said, "This head is mine. No one can snatch the military merit from me." There was a noisy roar of laughter around. Lu Buwang fell down. When he fell down, he was still holding the happy bracelet tightly in his hand. The wind was like a girl's hand, gently stroking his eyebrows. He lay on his back and no longer had the strength to stand up. In a trance, he seemed to have returned to many years ago when he went down the mountain for the first time. At that time, when he was riding a horse with a sword, he was also very heroic. His senior brother laughed and teased him, "Women at the foot of the mountain are tigers. Don't be confused by the world of mortals." He curled his lips and didn't take it seriously. As soon as he turned his head, he saw a girl in a red dress with a long braid sitting under a tree, and peach blossoms were falling like rain. Chapter 158. The canal was engulfed in a sea of fire and smoke. Yudo's screams, panicked cries, and Maka's orders were mixed together. In the end, they were all silenced by the crackling sound of wood being torn apart by the fire. This east wind came late, but it was strong. As if knowing that they were late, they desperately refused to stop. Thousands of Yudo's soldiers' boats were connected by iron hooks. The fire came quickly, and before they could escape, they were all engulfed in the sea of fire in the blink of an eye. It was rare for a smart Yudo to be slightly further away. They used all their strength to cut off the hooks, but the smoke was thick and they couldn't tell the direction. There were submerged reefs everywhere. If they accidentally bumped into one, the boat would capsize. At this time, the small boats of Jiang City's army showed their advantage. The small boats were agile and connected to the water. Even if they couldn't tell the direction, they were still Jiang people. Everyone knew the water and left easily. Even if they were affected by the fire, Jiang people knew how to swim. They dived into the water early and swam to the shore. Most of them were unharmed. The Yudo soldiers were not so lucky. Not many of them could escape from this fire attack. Even if they did, their morale was in chaos. They were probably defeated before the battle even started. Under the water, He Yan and Xiao Ju swam to the shore. The moment the fire was lit, Xiao Ju had already grabbed her and jumped into the water. The spring water was still cold. He Yan knew how to swim, but when the water reached her eyes and nose, her body unconsciously stiffened. It was as if she had returned to the Su family and was drowned in the pond by He Wanru's people. Because of this, the sky above the water was getting farther and farther away from her. She was forever left underwater, unable to see the light. In the beginning, he could still barely hold on, but after a period of time, it became more and more difficult for him to force it. His body's discomfort was always quickly dealt with, but the fear in his heart, the shadow left behind by a certain incident, was not something that could be easily forgotten. She gradually fell behind Xiao Ju. Xiao Ju, who was in front, seemed to have sensed something. Seeing He Yan fall behind him with a rarely seen pained expression, she couldn't help but be slightly startled. He Yan had never mentioned in front of Xiao Ju whether he could swim or not, but he definitely could. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to hold on until now when he jumped off the boat. But now, it seemed that he was afraid of water. This was also possible. For example, people who had been burned by fire in the past would later avoid fire when they saw it. A man who fell from a horse and got injured would never get back on a horse again, even if he was an expert horseman. He Yan should be able to swim, but he was afraid of water, probably like those people. Just as he thought of this, he saw He Yan's eyes close and his expression change. Xiao Ju frowned. She didn't even change her breathing. If this continued, she would suffocate to death. He turned back to He Yan's side and pressed He Yan's shoulder, trying to wake He Yan up. However, He Yan seemed to have lost most of her senses and did not respond to his actions. She looked pained. Perhaps she was thinking of some bad memories. Even under the water, he could vaguely see that she was nervous. Xiao Ju looked up. There was still some distance to the shore. If this continued, she would die. The girl's face was very close to him. She was underwater, her long hair had already scattered and the dirt on her face had been washed away. Her facial features were as clear and fragile as glass, as if they were about to disappear underwater. Xiao Ju made up his mind. He took a deep breath, pressed down on her shoulder, and leaned over to kiss her. He Yan felt as if someone was supporting her. She opened her eyes in a daze and seemed to see a handsome young man's face right in front of her. She felt as if someone was supporting her. She opened her eyes in a daze and seemed to see the young man's handsome face right in front of her. Was it a dream? He Yan thought to herself. Why did she have a wet dream at a time of life and death? The subject of this wet dream was extremely handsome, but the location was unexpectedly in the water. It was quite regrettable. She couldn't remember anything else. A chill slowly spread from her face. He Yan coughed and spat out a mouthful of water. She suddenly sat up. Beside her was Mu Yi. Seeing that she had woken up, he heaved a sigh of relief and said, "Miss He, you're finally awake." They were on the shore. On the surface of the canal in the distance, there was still smoke billowing and a sea of fire. She still remembered that she and Xiao Ju had jumped into the water. When she looked back, there was no trace of Xiao Ju beside her. She asked, "Where's the commander-in-chief? Why am I here?" "As soon as I reached the shore, I saw the commander-in-chief carrying you out. Miss He, you looked like you had fainted. The commander-in-chief asked me to take care of you and left." Mu Yi scratched his head. There are many Yudo on the shore. There aren't enough soldiers in Jiang City. Miss He, you rest here. I'll go and help first. No need. He Yen casually pulled out a piece of cloth from the hem of her inner clothes, tied up her long hair that had spread out in the water, and stood up. I'll go with you. At the mouth of the gourd, there was also a fierce battle at the moment. Previously, Lu Buwang used a formation to trap a group of Yudo. After the Yudo broke the formation, they fought fiercely with Lu Buwang. In the end, their morale was damaged and they were greedy for merit. When they reached the mouth of the gourd, they were all impetuous and didn't notice the hidden danger at all. Cui Yuezhi's archers who were lying in ambush in the dark shot arrows and caught the Yudo off guard. At this moment, there were not many Yudo left, and they were fighting with the 5,000 soldiers of Jiang City arranged by Cui Yuezhi. I wonder what the situation on the river is like. Cui Yuezhi was thinking in his heart when he suddenly saw someone come over and say loudly, "Sir, the east wind is rising. Military Governor Shao has already attacked the Yudo's ships with fire. The Yudo is now in a mess and has been defeated." Really? Cui Yuezhi was overjoyed. God bless Jiang. On the other side, when the Yudo heard this, he was immediately in a mess. While instructing the soldiers around him not to believe the enemy's trick to disturb the morale of the army, he couldn't help but let his imagination run wild. They were originally arranged to go ashore first, and the army would arrive later. However, as soon as they went ashore, they encountered the white-clothed swordsmen. They were entangled for a long time just by walking out of the formation. It had been so long, and the army should have arrived a long time ago. Why was there no movement now? Their morale was boosted at the first spurt, then weakened at the second, and exhausted at the third. Cui Yuezhi's side became braver as they fought, and the Yudo soldiers retreated in defeat. Boys! Cui Yuezhi shouted, "Fight with me." On the bank of the canal, the Yudo soldiers who had escaped from the Sea of Fire were fighting fiercely with the soldiers of Jiang City. When He Yen rushed over, the sound of swords clashing could be heard all around. Cui Yuezhi wasn't here. The several dozen people who had set the ship on fire with He Yen had spontaneously followed He Yen's lead. The Yudo soldiers no longer have the advantage in numbers. At least, the difference isn't too great now, He Yen said. The fire had buried most of the Yudo. Although there were still more Yudo soldiers left than Jiang City, the difference wasn't too great. Besides, their morale is definitely low right now. We can use this opportunity to catch them all in one fell swoop. He Yen tightened his grip on the whip in his hand. Go! On the edge of the ship, she immediately saw Xiao Ju surrounded by Yudo. These were Maka's trusted aides. It seemed that Maka hadn't been able to escape when the fire had been set. When the remaining aides saw that their master was gone, they knew that they would die if they returned. Thus, they all turned their attention to Xiao Ju. They wanted to drag her down with them. If they could kill Xiao Ju, they might be able to make up for their mistakes. The Yudo were packed densely together, taking turns to attack Xiao Ju. He Yen rushed into the crowd with his whip, knocking down a person with each strike. He then kicked away the person in front of him and retreated to Xiao Ju's side. Xiao Ju was slightly surprised. Why are you here? Of course I'm here, He Yen said. We agreed to advance and retreat together. I'm still hoping that if I succeed this time, the commander-in-chief will report me to the imperial court and give me an official position or something. Xiao Ju sneered. In your dreams. He Yen slowly held his whip horizontally in front of him. Wouldn't it be a waste if I don't even dream in my dreams? He rushed into the crowd. This group of Yudo was extremely cunning and cruel. They only attacked Xiao Ju and He Yen with all their might. It was as if they had gone crazy and wanted to fight to the death. The remaining soldiers of Jiang City and the rest of the Yudo were mixed together. They couldn't get close at all. He Yen was slightly annoyed. The number of soldiers of Jiang City was too small. Moreover, these Yuto were no longer fighting a war. They were just gathering to kill Xiaoju and her. I have to get rid of their leader first, she thought to herself. While she was thinking, she saw that the group of Yutos suddenly increased the intensity of their attacks. Logically speaking, since they were killing people and she had caused them to suffer such a great loss, they shouldn't ignore her. However, their momentum was directed at Xiaoju alone. What were they trying to do? He Yan became vigilant. He subconsciously retreated and wanted to warn Xiaoju. However, just as he turned around, he heard a boom. The small boat of Jiang City's soldiers that was docked, together with Xiaoju and the Yuto, exploded with a loud sound, just like the fire boat in the middle of the river just now. He Yan was also blown to the shore by the explosion. She immediately got up and looked into the distance. Her mind buzzed and she shouted, "Xiaoju!" The fragments of the boat were everywhere, and the water was violently churning from the explosion. Someone came to pull her hand and pulled her back. It was Mu Yi. Mu Yi said, "This is a firearm. I've heard that some of the Yudo's craftsmen know how to make firearms, but it's extremely rare. I didn't expect them to bring one with them today. They must be targeting military governor Xiao." He Yan had also heard of firearms before. However, it was very difficult to make firearms and it cost a lot of money. Even if they could make 10 of them, they might not be able to use them. The Fuyue army had limited funds back then, so they gave up in the end. The Yudo probably didn't have many firearms, otherwise, they could have thrown dozens of them at the beginning. Presumably, seeing that Maka was no longer here, he followed the idea of both sides suffering losses, and dragged Xiaoju down with him. Damn it! She gritted her teeth and turned around to run in the direction of the explosion. "Miss He." Mu Yi pulled her back and said anxiously, "There are still fragments of firearms around. It's very likely that there will be another explosion. It's very dangerous for you to go now." He Yan shook off his hand. Mu Yi wanted to persuade her again, but when he saw her expression, he suddenly paused and let go of her. He Yan turned around and ran into the water. There were more and more Yuto around them, blocking in front of He Yan. She simply swung her whip and sneered. She jumped up and snatched the long swords from two Yuto's hands. With two swords in hand, she didn't hesitate at all. As she pulled out her swords, the enemy fell down. Her hands and feet were tied. She couldn't use her sword to save herself from exposing herself, but at least she could use her swords. But what was the use of this? If only she could be a little earlier, a little earlier. He Yan's heart suddenly choked with sobs. There was nothing on the surface of the water, only fragments of the floating ship. Xiaoju's figure was nowhere to be seen. That person, the person who pulled her out of a desperate situation, the person who remembered her birthday, made her longevity noodles, took her to see fireflies, the person who laughed at her and indulged her in the spring, how could she disappear here? She had to get to the surface of the water quickly and find Xiaoju quickly. Lin Shuanghe was still in Jiang. If she could find him quickly, there might still be hope. There weren't many people in this world who were good to her. The one who was the best to her must not die. The Yuto was too much of a hindrance. He Yan's eyes were cold and sharp. The long swords in her hands danced, dazzling the onlookers. Her footsteps didn't stop. She just desperately rushed to the place where the explosion occurred. Mu Yi looked at the girl's figure and only felt that there was nothing in the world that could stop her. Her hands were as agile as an eagle's and as sharp as a knife. He didn't know that women could be like this. The Yuto pounced forward, but He Yan waved them away. Just like this, she pressed forward, the corpses of the Yuto soldiers behind her. Finally, she reached the surface of the water. "Xiaoju," she shouted. No one answered. "Xiaoju," He Yan bent down and tried to fish something out of the water. But when she raised her hand, only water flowed through the gaps between her fingers. There was nothing left. It was empty. She was a little confused, so confused that she couldn't tell what the uncontrollable sadness in her heart was. This feeling was like the day she suddenly became blind. It was like the day she was pressed into the water by Hiwanru's people. She was about to lose something very important. It was so sad. Xiaoju, she muttered. At this moment, a voice suddenly came from behind her. What are you shouting for? She suddenly turned around and saw a young man in black armor striding over. There seemed to be a hint of mockery in his cold eyes. From the shore to the shallow water, there were Yudo bodies that she had just killed in anger. The corpses fell to the side. It was clear that the knife technique was exquisite and cruel. They were all killed with one strike. The young man raised his eyebrows. His gaze fell on the long knife in her hand that was dripping with blood. After a moment, he looked at her with a faint smile. So fierce. The next moment, the girl suddenly rushed over and threw herself into his arms. Her hands tightly wrapped around his waist, and she buried her face in his chest. The Jiang City soldiers behind them on the shore were stunned. Xiaoju's body stiffened. Her eyes were slightly annoyed. The next moment, he closed his mouth because he felt the body in his arms trembling violently. She had jumped into the water earlier and almost suffocated herself in the water. Her inner clothes were already soaked, and the heavy armor on her body looked exceptionally cold. It made her seem especially fragile. Xiaoju tried to endure it, but in the end, he couldn't help but pull her face out of his arms. What are you doing? I'm not dead yet. He sneered. Yan stared at him in a daze. This person was standing in front of her, alive and well. He was alive and well. He was right in front of her. Tears suddenly fell from her eyes. Chapter 159. The girl's tears were like fragile dewdrops as they rolled down her cheeks. For a moment, they seemed to be scalding. Thinking about it carefully, this was the first time Xiaoju had seen Yan cry. He was startled and thought to himself, in the end, she's still a girl. No matter how powerful she is normally, it's still a bit scary to see her flesh and blood splatter on the battlefield for the first time. But, the last time she fought with Raida Musi, her reaction wasn't as intense as this. After thinking about it, Xiaoju finally frowned. He softened his voice and comforted her, it's okay now. Don't cry. He looked around and saw that the Yuchuo soldiers were only left with remnants of their last struggle. Cui Yuezhi's men had already arrived, so the rest were nothing to be afraid of. Commander-in-Chief. Slave Fei rushed over and looked at Yan. He was also stunned for a moment. How long are you going to stand here and cry? Xiaoju felt a headache coming on. Yan quickly wiped away her tears. She knew that she had lost her composure. Even though the situation was already decided, this wasn't the time to be sad. She turned around and said, sand got into my eyes just now. It's okay now. Let's wrap it up. Her voice still sounded like she was crying. This excuse was so lame that it felt perfunctory. Xiaoju couldn't be bothered to expose her. When she turned around and walked back with her sword, he suddenly grabbed Yan's arm. What's wrong? Yan looked back in confusion. Xiaoju didn't say anything and only looked behind her. Yan followed his gaze and saw a few drops of blood slowly flowing down from her waist into the river, leaving only a trail of blood. She was stunned and reached out to touch her back. The pain that had been dull for a long time seemed to have returned. She had probably charged into the Yuchuo soldiers in anger and only attacked without defending. The Yudo had taken advantage of the opening and injured her. Later, she had been in a hurry to find Xiaoju and didn't realize that she had been injured. The armor was heavy, so it wasn't obvious that she was injured. If not for the blood dripping down, it would have been hard to notice. Yan felt the pain, but it wasn't unbearable. It wasn't like he hadn't suffered injuries more painful than this in the past, so he didn't feel anything. Instead, he adjusted his armor and said indifferently, I might have been cut. I'll go back and bandage it. Go back to Lin Shuanghe now, Xiao Zhu said. We don't need you here. Yudo's momentum was gone, and Maka was dead. Thousands of ships were burning on the river, and Cui Yuezhi and the remaining soldiers of Jiang City were more than enough to deal with the remaining soldiers. However, He Yan didn't have the habit of letting his subordinates work while he himself rested, so he said, no need. It's just some minor injuries. Xiao Zhu frowned and looked at her coldly. There's really no need. He Yan tried to break free of his hand, but Xiao Zhu was too strong and couldn't break free. The young man in the dark armor looked down at her. His posture was tall, and his cold eyes seemed to contain knives. However, his tone was light. You don't know pain. You don't feel pain, so you don't know how to shout in pain. He Yan sensed that he seemed to be angry. She instinctively replied, it doesn't hurt. A hint of disdain flashed through the young man's eyes. He looked calmly at her and said, do you not feel pain, or do you not dare to feel pain? Do you think it's not necessary, or do you not need it? After saying this, he released his hand and turned to leave. He didn't look back at He Yan. What kind of temper is this? He Yan stood in place, and after a while, he muttered in a low voice, no one has taught me, and no one has coaxed me. She followed him. The war ended much earlier than expected. It took 2 days for the Yudo's ships to enter the canal, for the wind and fire to attack, and for the remaining soldiers to be cleaned up. It didn't even take 3 days. Of course, the bravery of Jiang City's soldiers and the ingenuity of Xiao Zhu's command and formation played a part in this. However, the most important factor was the east wind. If the wind had blown a little later or a little shorter, the result wouldn't have been like this. The fire from the east wind didn't stop and buried thousands of Yudo's ships in the canal outside Jiang City. Countless citizens of Jiang City knelt down and kowtowed in the direction of the canal. Tears flowed down their faces. Thank you, Water Goddess, for your protection. Thank you, General Fengyun, for commanding the troops like a god. Thank you, God, for protecting Jiang. God, for protecting Dewei. The morning glow dyed the surface of the river and dyed the blood-soaked river a golden red. It was unknown whether it was the blood of the martyrs or the morning glow. It was so magnificent that it was shocking. The remaining Jiang City soldiers on the shore took off their armor and sat on the ground. They stared blankly in the direction of the sunrise. Their blood-stained faces were filled with relief. Jiang City was defended. In the Cui residence, He Yan sat on the couch and watched Lin Shuanghe brew medicine for her. Brother Lin, leave this to Cui Jiao, He Yan said. There's no need to trouble you. Lin Shuanghe sat by the stove and fanned himself. What does this little girl know? My medicine can't be brewed by ordinary people. I have to do it myself. I say, little sister you too. Don't you know that there's such a big wound on your body? No wonder Huijin is so angry. If you die here, people will blame themselves. It's not a big wound. He Yan felt that this person was exaggerating. It's only the length of a palm. It didn't hurt any vital parts. In a real battle, this was considered a minor injury. There was once when she was hit by an arrow in her shoulder. She had to continue fighting, but the doctors around her couldn't take care of her. She could only pull out the arrow with her bare hands and continue fighting with the arrow embedded in her skin. Later, when the military doctor came to see her, He Yan's entire sleeve was dyed red with blood. The wound was stuck to the cloth and could not be pulled apart. As long as she could still walk and fight, it was considered a minor injury as long as it did not harm her life. Little sister, when will you remember that you're a girl? When I was treating other young ladies in Shua capital, they would sometimes kill themselves just because of a birthmark the size of a fingernail. If you send this wound over, people will be able to see it. He lifted the lid of the medicine pot to take a look. The medicine was boiling in the pot and bubbling. Lin Shuanghe put the lid down again. He held the pot with a handkerchief and placed it on the table beside him. Let's not talk about whether your life is in danger or whether you can endure pain. But don't you like to be beautiful? He took a clean medicine bowl from the side and poured the medicine in the pot into it. Aren't you afraid that your future husband will dislike you? Don't blame me for saying this, but it's normal for a girl to pay attention to this. He Yen leaned against the couch and looked at his actions. She smiled and said, I don't plan on getting married. Why? Lin Shuanghe paused and looked at her. You're young and not bad. Your personality can be considered straightforward and cute. Since you don't have any difficult illnesses, why don't you plan on getting married? Getting married is boring. He Yen sighed. It's just a house. Walking around in the same place, it's just the same place. It's better to live in the military camp. Your way of thinking is quite strange. Lin Shuanghe put the medicine aside to dry. When you meet someone you like in the future, you won't think this way. Even if I meet someone I like, I still won't get married, He Yen said. Lin Shuanghe narrowed his eyes. Younger sister He, don't tell me you already have someone you like. No. Although she answered straightforwardly, Lin Shuanghe suddenly felt suspicious. He Yen was perfectly fine, so why would she say such depressing words? Based on his many years of experience with women, for a girl to say something like, I don't want to get married, at such a young age, it was most likely that she had been hurt by love. He Yen had always been in the Liang province guards, practicing with swords and rods all day long. Where did this hurt from love come from? His heart trembled. Could it be that she had really fallen in love with Chu Xilan? And because of Chu Xilan's identity and his relationship with Su Pingting, she knew that she couldn't marry Chu Xilan. Was that why her heart was like dead ashes? But if that was the case, what about Xiao Ju? For a moment, Lin Shuanghe felt that all kinds of situations were very serious. Seeing him in a daze, He Yen asked again, Brother Lin, have you seen my master? From the beginning of the war to the end of the war, when everyone began to clean up the mess, He Yen didn't see Lu Buwang. Lin Shuanghe said, that morning, Master Lu left with Cui Zhongqi. Cui Zhongqi was busy taking care of the wounded soldiers and hadn't come back yet. Master Lu should be with him. He Yen nodded, but he felt a little uneasy. Lin Shuanghe walked to He Yen again, took out a round box from his sleeve, and put it beside He Yen's pillow. This is our family's secret scar removal ointment. Use it on your body. I don't dare to say that you'll recover completely, but it's still possible to recover most of your scars. He Yan's body had already been bandaged by a female doctor in Jiang City. At this moment, he picked it up and looked at it. He saw that the words, scar removal and muscle growth, were written on the round box, which looked particularly familiar. Thinking back carefully, he remembered that when he went to Liangzhou City with Xiao Ju, he was injured in a fight with Ding Yi at night. Later, when he returned to the Liangzhou City guards, Shen Muxue also put such a box on the medicine tray when he brought her medicine. At that time, He Yen used it, and it really had an excellent scar removal effect. His scars were now very light. At that time, she was very grateful to Shen Muxue for being so careful and praised the magic of the ointment. Unfortunately, the box was very small, and there wasn't much medicine, so it was gone after she used it. Is this your family's secret ointment? He Yen asked. Lin Shuanghe was a little proud. To be precise, it's my secret ointment. Is it very expensive? Little sister He, how can you use money to measure the value of medicine? I'm not selling this medicine. If I really did sell it, the people in Shuajing City would be able to live comfortably for several lifetimes with this medicine. Money is like floating clouds to me. I specially made this medicine for Huijin. He gets injured easily every day, and when Xiao Ruby sees him later, her heart will ache. If I add some scar removal ointment, Xiao Ruby won't be able to tell, and she'll feel better. So that her big brother won't worry? He Yen thought to himself, Xiao Ju is quite cautious. But she clearly remembered that Shen Muxue was the one who gave it to her. He Yan asked Lin Shuanghe, have you never made this medicine for other people? Like other girls? What do you mean? Lin Shuanghe said curiously, if this medicine really gets out, not only me, but even my father and grandfather will be annoyed to death. I won't tell anyone else. I only made it for Huijin. I didn't make much, only a few boxes. I only gave you one box because you and I are close. Don't tell anyone else. This medicine is hard to make, and I still want to live for a few more years. He Yan. Okay. Then take your time to drink the medicine. Rest after you've finished. Lin Shuanghe waved his fan in satisfaction. I'll go out and ask if there's anything else I can help with. Lin Shuanghe left, and He Yan looked at the medicine box in her hand. The medicine box was exquisite, and she held it in her palm. Xiao Ju gave it to her. The wounded soldiers were all settled down, and the dead soldiers were all recorded in a book. There weren't many soldiers in Jiang City to begin with, and after this battle, there weren't many left. Cui Yuezhi led the soldiers behind him to clean up the battlefield. He also had many injuries on his body. His face was covered in blood, and there was a wound on his head that was wrapped up with a white cloth. When he saw Xiao Ju coming from afar, Cui Yuezhi hurriedly went to greet him. Military Governor Xiao. Xiao Ju was much younger than him, but he didn't dare to underestimate him anymore. If not for Xiao Ju, Jiang City would not have been able to defend itself against the 150,000 Yuchuo soldiers. Luck played a part in their narrow victory, but more importantly, it was because of this lucky general. In He Yan's words, he was a famous general. He didn't lose when he shouldn't have, and he could win when he couldn't. No matter how bad the chess game was, he could turn defeat into victory. Of course, Miss He was also very powerful. However, he heard that she was injured and was sent back to her residence to rest. The battlefield has already been cleaned up, Cui Yuezhi said. Once the Yuchuo soldiers have finished counting their casualties, we can return to the prince's residence and report the situation to His Highness. His Highness will write a report about this battle and report it to the imperial court. None of the people in Jiang City dare to forget the life-saving grace of the commander-in-chief. Xiao Ju walked forward. No need to thank them. Thank them. Cui Yuezhi was a little emotional. Probably because they had fought side by side before, he also felt a bit of genuine affection for Xiao Ju. Just as he was about to speak, someone suddenly came over. It was Cui Yuezhi's subordinate. Cui Yuezhi's subordinate glanced at Xiao Ju with a hesitant expression. What's the matter? Cui Yuezhi asked. Sir, we found Mr. Lu. Lu Buwang hadn't been with them since the start of the battle. Cui Yuezhi was worried. Hearing this, he asked anxiously, where is he? On the forest bank in front of the mouth of the calabash. The subordinate said, Mr. Lu. Cui Yuezhi's heart gradually sank. He looked at Xiao Ju. Xiao Ju lowered his eyes. After a while, he said calmly, lead the way. Lu Buwang died in the center of the tactical deployment. He died very miserably. His body was covered with wounds. The most fatal wound was a knife wound on his chest, which ran through his heart from the back to the front. Before he died, the corners of his mouth were still curled up, without any resentment. He was very calm as if he had seen something very beautiful. In addition, there were many Yuto who had died under his sword around him. There were also corpses in the depths of the dense forest. Cui Yuezhi looked at them for a long time and asked hesitantly, is it Chiman Dunjia? Xiao Ju said, yes. Cui Yuezhi was in awe. Nowadays, there were not many people who knew Chiman Dunjia. Lu Buwang set up the tactical deployment here and killed many Yuto, which bought them a lot of time. If it weren't for Lu Buwang, those Yuto would have entered the city and started a killing spree. The consequences would have been unimaginable. Lu Buwang didn't tell anyone that he had been blocking in front for so long that no one knew that he had died. His sword fell beside him, his zither was smashed into pieces, and his white clothes were stained with blood. Cui Yuezhi looked at Xiao Ju worriedly. He only knew that Lu Buwang was Xiao Ju's master. Now that Lu Buwang was dead, Xiao Ju must be very sad. Xiao Ju squatted down and slowly tidied up Lu Buwang's clothes, which had been messed up by the Yudo. Then she took out a handkerchief from her arms and wiped the blood off his face. After doing all this, she looked at Lu Buwang's face and said in a low voice, "Take him back." He Yan stayed in the Cui mansion until the evening. Cui Yuezhi's 4 concubines took turns to visit her and brought her all kinds of food. Even though He Yan liked sweets, she couldn't eat so many sweets. After she finally sent the concubines away, someone came to report, "Master is back. The commander-in-chief is back." He Yan was refreshed. She got out of bed, put on her shoes, and walked out. Cui Yuezhi and Xiao Ju were back. Maybe Lu Buwang was back too. As soon as Cui Yuezhi walked to the door, she was surrounded by the 4 concubines, especially the 3rd concubine. She hugged Cui Yuezhi and cried her heart out. She was really good at crying. He Yan was thinking in his heart when he saw a person walking past Cui Yuezhi and coming towards him. It was Xiao Ju. She hadn't had time to take off her armor and was travel-worn. He Yan didn't feel disgusted. He thought in his heart, sure enough, a person with extraordinary appearance can't hide her beauty even if she is covered in dust. Xiao Ju walked up to her and frowned slightly. "Who let you come out?" "It's not a big deal." He Yan clapped her hands. "Even Brother Lin thinks that you are making a fuss over a minor issue. By the way, Commander-in-Chief, have you seen my master?" "I asked around, but no one has seen him. At this time, he should be back." Hearing this, Xiao Ju's eyes moved and fell on her face. A trace of pity flashed through those cold black eyes. It was like a silent sigh that fell on people's hearts. He Yan's smile slowly disappeared. She asked, "Is something wrong?" Xiao Ju said, "Go and see him." He Yan's entire body froze. Lu Buwang was sleeping on the couch in the room. His clothes had been changed. Except for his pale face, he looked like he was asleep. It was as if as long as she called him, he would sit up, look at her with a smile, and call her, "He." He Yan's eyes suddenly turned red. She almost couldn't stand steadily. She walked to Lu Buwang's side and held his hand. His hand was very cold, not as warm as when he pulled her up from the pile of corpses. He used to be a light sleeper and would wake up as long as there was a slight movement. Now she called him master here, but he was unmoved. He Yan's hand touched his shoulder. After a pause, she gently pulled down Lu Buwang's clothes. His clothes had been changed, so it was obvious that he was injured. But He Yan didn't expect that there would be so many wounds. Those Yudos suffered a big loss in Lu Buwang's hands, so they naturally wanted to pay him back 100 times. When Lu Buwang's physical strength was exhausted, he rushed to make another cut on the spoils of war. His body was broken into pieces. However, his expression was so calm, as if he had just fallen asleep under the flower tree and had a beautiful dream. He Yan's gaze fell on Lu Buwang's hand, which was clenched into a fist very tightly. He Yan was silent for a moment. Then she used a little strength to pry open his fingers and saw what he was hiding in his palm. It was a silver bracelet. It looked very rough and seemed to be an old thing from many years ago. It was probably played with and treasured every day. Some carvings had been smoothed out and were not very obvious. But she could still see a small wild daisy carved on the edge of the bracelet. This was what Lu Buwang wanted to protect at the end of his life. He had no children and only took her as his disciple. At the end of his life, except for a zither, a sword, and this silver bracelet, he left nothing. Empty and vast, clean and tidy. He Yan's throat was choked with sobs and she couldn't speak. They had reunited after a long time, but they were going to be separated forever before they could say a few words. She desperately held back her tears, and a handkerchief was placed in front of her. If you want to cry, just cry. Xiaoju said, I'll be outside. No one will come in. His voice was very soft and light, with a little imperceptible comfort. Before He Yan could speak, he turned and went out. The door was closed behind him. A girl's cry came from behind the door. At first, it was a suppressed sob. Then, as if she couldn't suppress it, the cry became louder and louder. In the end, she wailed like a child who couldn't get candy. The crying reached the ears of concubine Wei in the next room. She stood up and twisted her handkerchief uneasily. Should I go and take a look? Don't. Second concubine shook her head and looked out of the window. The young man stood in front of the door with his hands behind his back, like a guardian guarding the fragile precious thing. You and I can't comfort her at such a sad time. Let them solve it themselves. The wailing in the room stopped at some point. After a long time, the door opened with a creak, and someone walked out from inside. Xiaoju looked sideways. The girl's tears had been wiped clean. Except for her red eyes, there was nothing wrong with her. Her expression was calm and even a little deliberately relaxed. Commander-in-Chief, thank you for guarding the door for me, she said. Xiaoju frowned and looked at her. He Yan looked back. Why are you looking at me? Is there something on my face? It's ugly. What? You look ugly when you lie. His black eyes were glittering, and his words were as cold as ice. With a kind of insight, he said in a deep voice, I've said it before. You can cry when you want to cry, and you can smile when you don't want to. It's better than your pretentious look now. It's extremely ugly. His words were really not pleasant to hear. He Yan was stunned for a moment, and then she smiled. She said, I'm not pretending. It's just, that's all I can do. Lu Buwang was dead. This was a fact that couldn't be changed. She could be sad for Lu Buwang's death, but she had to look forward. People couldn't tell everyone their pain and sadness. This would only make people hate them. Some painful things should be kept in the heart. If she always cried to others, over time, others would hate her, and she wouldn't be able to get over it. She used the experience of 2 lifetimes to tell herself that no matter how difficult things were, they would pass. But, do you know? She sighed. There are not many people in this world who are good to me. I can count them with one hand. Now, there is one less. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.